Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Graduate Dentist Podcast, your go-to guide through real-world dentistry and a community amongst graduates. My name is Erica Quinn, and welcome back to our very first episode for 2025. I hope you all had a wonderful and very relaxing and restful Christmas break, and that you are ready to jump in full throttle into 2025. I also want to say a big congratulations to all our first-year new grads who have either just started or are about to commence their first days of working. Our Discord community is almost at 500 members in the short 2 months since its launch, which is absolutely crazy to see. And over the last few weeks, we have been seeing dozens of questions come in every day from all our new grads who are just starting work, have questions and concerns about this, that, and the other. And it is super encouraging and heartwarming to see how supportive our community is. There really is no silly questions, and there's always someone out there who is willing to share their experience or help answer questions. And so I'm really proud of what we've created, and a big thank you to everyone who's contributed to the community. And so if you're not already a part of it, be sure to check out our show notes or our social media for the Discord invite link. And on the theme of starting work, this is exactly what I wanted to kick off the year with, our very first episode. And so today we are very lucky to be joined by Dr Annas Ayoub, who I was fortunate to cross pathways over the last couple of months, and through our discussions it's become apparent that we share very similar goals. Just like all of us, Dr Annas, once upon a time, a fresh new grad just trying to figure everything out. Now, with his years of experience, he is all about helping give back to our community and helping associate dentists get more out of their working career by working smarter, not harder. Through his Associate Accelerator course, he is helping teach dentists how to communicate better, how to treatment plan more effectively, how to be more efficient with their workflows, and to boost their overall productivity so that they have more job satisfaction, a better work-life balance, and time to do the things they truly enjoy in life. And so if you want more information about Annas's course, you can check it all out in our show note. And so in today's episode, Annas and I decided to host our very first podinar, where we did a live stream webinar / podcast chat talking through the 10 things you should know as a new grad. And so for our listeners, if you're not driving, you can follow along with the slideshow presentation as we chat. This was a really fun back and forth discussion, and I love the opportunity to reflect on all the things that I've learned in my first 2 years of working, and to be in the position now where I get to help pass that on to you guys. Everything is so new and so foreign as a new grad, and with experience, we very quickly forget or we take it for granted all the things that we worried about, that we lost sleep over, that we fretted over. But when we take the moment to really stop and think, it's amazing how much there is to unpack. And honestly, Annas and I struggled to try keeping things concise with our chat. And honestly, despite limiting it to just the top 10 things in this episode, Annas and I really could have gone on forever. But regardless, I hope this gives you guys some guidance, whether you are a brand new fresh grad or you've been out for a couple of years. I hope you take something away from this conversation, and that it gives you a little bit of a booster, sparks a little fire within you as we jumpstart the year together. It's going to be a great year, guys, and I'm so excited for us to embark on it together. So without further ado, enjoy our very first podinar with Dr Annas Ayoub. Hello, Annas, and welcome back to the Graduate Dentist Podcast,
Yeah.
round 2.
First time.
Your first time. Well, this is our second time recording, because our first time we did a brilliant recording. We did a live webinar, had all these people live streaming in, joining us, and then we lost the recording. So second round means
Yep,
we know what we're doing, hey?
100%. We're going to record this one for sure.
We made sure we press record. And as I'm really, really grateful for you joining me on the podcast. We had a really nice conversation a few weeks ago, obviously leading up to us deciding to do something together. And my thoughts on it were, this is going to be the first episode of the year. We've got so many grads who are now starting their first few weeks of work. Everyone's been asking us questions. Our Discord's been popping off with all these new grads, asking all the trials and questions that they have going into their first month of working. And so we thought we'd put together a bit of a presentation, hey, on 10 things to know as a new grad. And you have come up with, some key points,
A
some
refined
gems,
list.
a refined
Yep.
list, obviously, from your years of experience and working in this area. This is a bit of a passion of yours, hey, and as
Yes.
you're teaching yourself.
Yeah, so I really, really love teaching associates. I find that it's honestly a little bit more rewarding for me than actual dentistry.
Why
Just
is
watching
that?
somebody grow, I don't know if it's like
Yeah.
fatherly instinct or something. A lot of proud moments, like when somebody they come to me and they're worried about, I don't know, like prepping a crown or something like that, and I give them a few bits of advice, and they come back and they're like, "Oh, I tried it; it worked really well." I don't know. I get more satisfaction out of that than actual dentistry for some reason.
Well, they say, right, like a true sign of someone who knows what they're doing well is the ability to teach it, right? So
I hope
I think
so.
it's a testament of you know what you're doing and you're able to pass on your
Yes.
knowledge to other people. And obviously, you was it last year you started launching your Associate Accelerator Program to really help associates take things to the next level. That one we think is perhaps you're already in your career and you want to refine your skills
Mm.
and learn how to be a better dentist. But we wanted to strip things back a little bit with today's chat and the presentation you've come up with us today
Mhm.
on just for things for fresh grads, things that we think, in your first few months of working, what you should know. I think a heads up for our listeners is that obviously we now have video recordings as well, and NASA's put together a beautiful PowerPoint presentation. So if you're not driving, you can also watch along and see the presentation as well. But if you hear us referencing things, it's because we're looking at a
Yeah.
screen, right?
It's Canva, actually. I don't use PowerPoint,
Yeah.
I'm not that old.
Sorry, not
Yes,
PowerPoint.
it's Canva. I just
we're,
learnt
we're,
it.
we're cool and trendy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Alright, so
Well, let's take it away, Anas.
thank you. So the first thing is thank you for having me. I've decided to come up with this list of like sort of 10 pearls or 10 gems that you should know as a new grad. And these are things that I wish I knew at the time. I know it was a
Mm.
bit overwhelming when I first graduated. It's like, oh, do I need to set up an ABN? Do I need to, well, what is this contract? Do I have to get like, what's a high caps? There's a lot of questions that I had to kind of answer myself or find out through my nurses, to be honest. So I wanted to put together this little podinar, we'll call it, to go
Hmm.
through the list of things together.
And I think what makes this chat exciting as well, Anas, is obviously we have both our experiences. You as someone who, mentors and looks after your
Mhm.
associates or your fellow colleagues within your practice and, helps them level up. You're now, I think, 7, 8 years out, Anas?
About 8? I don't know. You'll have to do the
About 8.
math, honestly. 20 was it 2017? How many years ago is that?
Oh, I
Pre-COVID.
don't know.
That's all you have to know.
Yeah. Whereas I was mid COVID and I graduated. This is now my third year,
Mm,
and so I guess I'm excited to kind of go do a bit of a back and forth and hear from both our experiences and relating it to when we were in our first year, all those questions that we had.
we'll jump right into it. The first thing
Mm.
I wanted to talk to you about and the viewers is legal jargon. So you will hear a lot of terms you've never heard before. I know I was thoroughly overwhelmed when I first kind of got out. And the first thing that was handed to me was this massive contract that I had no
Mm.
idea what I was looking at. And it was about, believe my one was about 60 pages. I'm not sure how long your one was. And I was trying to read through it and I was like, there's no way that like fresh graduates are able to read this thing and sign it and, know what they're talking about. So to me, it was really daunting. What I found is, luckily, I was a member of the ADA, and I know they have a bit of a service. Did you use their service at all, Erica?
I didn't use their service, no.
Who did you use to for your contracts?
I was really lucky that my boss actually went through it with me, which is really nice. But similar to you, it was like got given this like 40, 50 page document. I'm like, oh my goodness, like
Mm,
this is all going over my head. But he kind of talked me through it, explained it, and then had said that like the main terms or the main things that were really important were towards the end.
hmm
Right. Like all the beginning is all just like definitions of things. And then at the end is when it tells you like, your retainer or your restraints on where you can practice or the kilometers or all of those things like a little bit of a table. It tells you your percentages
hmm
and whatnot. But I know ADA also has those services to help go through those things too. Yeah. How about yourself?
There was a few lines that I actually asked to be changed, and they
Yep.
weren't at the end. They were actually kind of stuck in the middle somewhere, so they were hard to see. So
Mm,
there's no way I would have seen them if I was just reading my own contract and signing it. Plus, if
yeah.
you ever read a contract, I think lawyers just make it sound very convoluted on purpose.
Yeah. It's confusing,
Yeah,
right? Mm,
yeah. Honestly, just get somebody who knows what they're doing to read through it because you
mm-hmm.
really don't want to be signing something that you're not going to be happy with later. Right now, it might be
Mm-hmm.
all roses and sunshine, But later
Mm-hmm.
on, if things change, you really want to be happy that you signed something. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, rule number one is don't work without contracts. And if you do sign a
Don't
contract,
sign.
pretty
Yeah.
much don't sign anything that you can't read.
Mm-hmm.
Most contracts are made by, I believe I've seen a lot of K&L Gates ones. They're usually pretty copy pasted with, kind of recycled versions of those, but some of the lines can be problematic. So definitely getting somebody who knows what they're talking about to look at them would be a good idea. The other thing that you'll kind of, once you graduate, you'll learn about is if you've got SFAs and you've got employment. So an
Mm.
SFA is just a service facilities agreement. So you're just going to provide your services at someone's facility. It's pretty much how you
Mm-hmm.
summarize it. And the facility being the clinic. And the opposite of that would be to be an employee. Now, everyone pretty much knows what an employee is. The main difference is with an SFA, you're sort of a kind of like a contractor. So you don't get super paid leave, sick leave, all of these extra perks. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, you just get paid usually a commission, and you can
Mm.
choose however you want to distribute that commission. If you want to take a day off, you pretty much just don't get paid. There's no paid leave. So really, that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of the summary of it. Most associates would be on an SFA. I think it's a bit
Mm.
rarer to be an employee unless you're a new grad.
The way that I've kind of heard is definitely, I think within the dental industry, there's been a big shift towards SFAs where the way that I was taught it was that it's like you're running your own business within a business. And so it's like, okay, you're your own business, you see your patients and whatnot, but then you are borrowing their facilities and their services. So kind of like hiring the clinic and the chair and the equipment and the staffing. And so you pay a percentage for using those surfaces, whether that be like 65%, 60%, whatever it may
Hmm.
be. I think that's usually the case nowadays for dentists, unless, as you said, I think some new grads are still employees.
Yep.
And I think there's pros and cons of it, particularly like when you're building your books, you don't have to worry
Hmm.
about how many patients you're seeing and then how
Yep.
much you're getting away from that. It's just you go to work. You work your number of hours, you get paid a set amount. And it's nice sometimes. I know some practices say that, like, oh, because of that, it means that even if you don't have patients, but you're going and observing other dentists, right? Or if it takes you a little bit longer, it's okay. It takes that stress out of, oh, I need to bill in order to make ends meet, right? It's just you can focus on being a good dentist and just learning, right?
So you just focus on
Mm-hmm.
learning. I think that's the main thing with being an employee is you don't have to worry
Mm-hmm.
about the numbers as much. You really don't want
Mm-hmm.
to be worrying about your billings in the first year or two, at least.
Mm-hmm.
That's the time where you really should be learning. And I think we'll get into this a little bit later, but yeah, you shouldn't even be looking at your billings in the first year or two. You should
Mm-hmm.
be looking at your dentistry. Like, has it
Mm-hmm.
improved? Am I getting more efficient? Is my class twos improving? I'm still working on
Yeah.
mine.
Me too,
Yeah.
right? It's the hardest bit of
Yeah,
dentistry,
honestly.
right?
Yeah, so I think you also touched on commissions there, kind of indirectly, where the service fee that you pay them is anywhere from
Mm-hmm.
60 to 65% a lot of the time, which leaves you with about
Mm-hmm.
35 to 40%. Now, you can choose
Mm-hmm.
whether you want to put some of that into your super, whether you want to put some of that on the
Yeah.
side. And I really like that flexibility, especially when you're a bit younger, especially if you know
Mm-hmm.
where this money's going to go and you don't want to be forced to lock it away. So you could choose what to do with it. And usually, if somebody's on above 40%, they have some sort of specialized skill.
Mm.
So, if you're a traveling dentist, which is becoming a little bit more common, and you do only implants, for example, then you start getting above that 40% range. But for most new
Mm-hmm.
grads, or at least for this discussion,
Mm.
40% is considered pretty good.
Yeah. It depends like if you're working rurally or in
Yes,
metro.
that's the
There's a
other
lot of,
thing.
as you said, like incentives,
Yeah.
right? I have had a lot of people ask me like questions about this. And like you said, there are so many words that we've never heard about as a student, right? And like things like your super and like these contracts, commission, salary, go into your licenses and what do you need,
Mm,
prescriber number, all those things. One reference that I have shared with some grads or
mm,
people that have asked me and also in our Discord community as well is that we referenced before that ADA is such a great resource. But
mm.
each year ADA releases a graduate handbook. And they refine it, they refresh it every single year, but it goes through all of these things. I read it when I was a final year student, and I don't think enough people read it.
I've never heard of it until now. Thank you.
Yeah, it's actually a phenomenal resource because it takes you through absolutely everything that you need to know before you start work. So, like, the different states, like which, because there's the radiation licensing is different in all the states. And so it tells you that, and it'll tell you your provider number, how to apply for your very first one, how to apply for your second one, the differences between that
Mm-hmm.
and your prescriber number, understanding the different types of employment
Mm-hmm.
structures, your reading your contracts, like who to engage, like absolutely everything. So we're kind of glazing over it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, but I think for anyone who just wants to understand it, I think the ADA graduate handbook, if anyone wants that, I'll link it in our show notes as well. But it's 100% a great place to go to read everything.
I wish I was there.
Mm.
I wish it
Yeah.
was there when I graduated, honestly, because I was finding out
Yeah.
bits and pieces as
Yeah.
time went by. It wasn't really there wasn't really one book that had everything in it. I
Hmm.
need to double check actually if they had a 2017 version then. But yeah,
I'll send it to you
yeah,
afterwards in case you want to, make sure you haven't missed
yeah,
anything,
I probably
right?
have. But yeah, with provider numbers, like it's pretty straightforward. It's just a number to identify you at a practice, so it's pretty
Hmm.
straightforward. Usually, the first one takes a while to get. Every subsequent one
Hmm.
after that is pretty much provided to you within a day or so. And then final thing I've got here on the slide is about ABN and being a sole trader. A lot of the time,
Mm,
especially if you're on an SFA, you'll be a sole trader. There is some structures that accountants like to set up, like having a company and all of that. But a lot of the
mm,
time, the sole trader is the safe, simple bet. And that's pretty much it with legal jargon. I think the ADA document would probably have a lot more information on this,
mm.
but I think,
Yeah.
yeah,
When in doubt, ask, right? Mhm.
100%. Point number 2 is communication courses. Now, I believe you've had
Mm.
a big podcast on this relatively recently, and I think that
Yeah, with Dr. Darren Kai, that was like 2 hours long.
yeah, I think that covered a lot of the communication aspects and why it's important. The obvious
Mm,
ones are like it improves your case acceptance, it allows you to
mm,
get informed consent, it allows you to build a rapport. And if you can't communicate with patients, you can't do any of these things, which means you can't practice the dentistry you want.
mm,
Especially when you start talking about complex
mhm,
treatment plans. Now, at this stage, if you're a new grad, a complex treatment plan might be a couple of crowns. But as you get more and more
mm,
into it and the treatment plans start being a very substantial amount of money, it's really important that you're able to navigate and communicate with the patient and you're not just kind of, just going in blind. But the one key takeaway from all communication courses is honestly just being genuine and honest when you talk to patients. And we're sort
mm,
of wired to detect when somebody's trying to lie to us or they're trying to deceive us. So I think, you know, if you take one thing away from all the communication courses, is just pretty much say what you think. Okay. Don't
mm.
try to sugarcoat it. Don't try to hide it. Please don't suggest treatment that you don't think is needed because the patient will sense it and they'll hit you with you know, the I want to think about it phrase. If you
Yeah.
hear I want to think about it a lot, I can tell you
You've
something
lost it.
that yeah, they're not thinking about it.
Yeah,
Has that been your experience,
100%.
Erica?
I feel like, when you say that, like being authentic and being genuine and honestly believing in what you're saying, I think that's really hard as a grad because you haven't had the experience to know. It's like, how can you believe something if you're not even sure if, like, it will work or not?
Mhm.
Like, when I remember being a new grad and even just treatment planning, like, my very first filling, and then, I'm sure we'll talk about money afterwards as well, but it's the, like, well, do they need a filling? And then your patients ask you, like, "Oh, how long will it last?" Or, "How long will this crown last?" And I'm like, "Well, literature tells
Oh,
me it
yeah.
should last, 10, 15 years," or, like, I know my senior dentist or my boss's ones will probably last 30 years, but mine, like, I don't know how long it's last. I haven't been a dentist long enough to know how it will
Mhm.
last. So there is that bit of what people always say, like, you got to fake it till you make it.
Mhm.
But then it's just like, you can't overdo that because that comes across. If you're lying, if you genuinely don't believe
Mhm.
in what you're doing, patients will be able to sniff it out, right? So
Mhm.
I think new grads, you do get the short straw. You start off really hard because you don't even believe in yourself, right? So I think communication is just hard for so many reasons where you're not used to talking to people, you're not used to servicing people, but you're also not used to just being a clinician and doing dentistry, right? So some things just do take a bit of experience for you to know what to expect. And then you kind of develop that
Mhm.
confidence and then you can speak with a bit more conviction to your patients.
Yeah, I think your communication
Yeah.
naturally gets better with experience, even if you do no courses,
Mm,
but that
mm,
can only really take you so far. I think you need
mm,
to be equipped with tools from these courses
mm-hmm,
to kind of simplify things, give you some sort of frameworks, structures, avoid any scripts is what I can tell
Yeah.
you. Please don't do scripts. I've actually had a lot of patients come from practices that practice these scripts because they were like, everyone's just sounded like a robot.
What do you mean by scripts? Can you give me an example of one that like
There,
irks you?
there is a course
Mm.
that teaches a lot of scripts. I don't want to name the
Yeah.
course, but
Yeah.
there is a course that teaches a lot of scripts, and I can tell you right now, patients can sense it. When you over dramatize and like you see a crack and you're like, wow, that's a big crack. That's going to hurt when it breaks. And, you start exaggerating like that. It just doesn't come off as genuine to me. It doesn't feel right. So
Mm.
I've heard that at some courses. Things like that, like there's no need to over dramatize things. Like you're talking about teeth. You
Mm.
obviously have to warn the patient, etc. But if you just come off as a genuine person, like patients will believe you because they're like, this guy is not going to lie to me. Like he's just being honest that this tooth needs work.
Mm.
There's no need to add all these extra theatrics, is what I'll call it.
I get what you mean by that.
Mm.
I think when we talk about scripts, like my thoughts on it is that I know that I have the same stories
Mm-hmm.
that I say day in, day out, or the same
Mm-hmm.
analogies or the same things because it's like we talk, every time you have to tell a patient about a broken tooth
Mm-hmm.
or like, the risk of needing a root canal or extraction, we say the same things day in,
Mm-hmm.
day out. So there's a bit of that familiarity. I feel like personally, a lot of my communication, I think of myself as like an amalgamation of all the people I've ever watched or observed or learnt from because you take little things from here or there. But I think the one thing I would agree with you is that you can't just copy what other people have
Yes.
said, or you can't copy a script. I think it's good to have a framework,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's good to just recite something
Mm-hmm.
because it sounds recited. You kind of have to inject your own personality
Exactly. Yeah.
to make it genuine. So I don't think it's wrong to have a framework or to have, something that that you want to say and things that you want to check off,
Mm-hmm.
but it has to be your own. It's the
Exactly.
whole copy, like plagiarism, right? Like
Yeah. Change a few words.
change a few
Yeah.
words.
That's how I got through uni. Anyway. So don't
Yeah.
just copy paste. Obviously, you can take a few
Mm,
phrases here or there, but if it's too worded, then it's very obvious.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I did have another question I wanted to ask you about communication, right? Particularly for our new grads. I know I'm just thinking of questions that every new grad fears getting asked by their patients, when they first start. Maybe I'll bring this as like twofold. When you meet a patient,
Mm-hmm.
actually, like you right now, and maybe we can wind it back to perhaps when you were a new grad, do you introduce yourself and do you introduce the practice or how do you do you have a little introduction? How do you?
So usually for me, I know a lot of people like to go get the patient. In my
Mm,
case, it's the opposite. The nurse gets the patient. I want the nurse to be connected to the patient and honest because I leave the room a lot because I've got other
mm,
oral health therapists that I need to go check up, etc. And I actually want the patient to talk to the nurse when I'm not in the room because that's when they
mm-hmm,
say what they're feeling. They're not going to
mm,
say it in front of you. The other thing is
yeah.
when the patient comes in and the nurse introduces me to them, I introduce myself as well. It's kind of like she handballs it to me, and then I take over from there and I say thank you. And then it's a little bit backwards and forwards. So when I leave the room, the patient's already familiar with the nurse. She's not just this random person standing in the corner. um, so it gets the nurses involved a lot. It gives them a bit of sense of responsibility, but at the same time, the patient feels like there's multiple touch points and there's multiple people that are
Mm,
talking to them and they feel really valued.
mm-hmm,
So I prefer to
mm-hmm,
do it that way. Plus, I'm lazy and I
mm-hmm.
don't want to walk up and down the hallways all the time. So,
Yeah. The step count though, Anas. You
yeah,
really
I aim for 500. It'll be right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot that comes with leaving university and properly adulting that no one really prepares you for. As a new grad with an income and newfound responsibilities we don't know what to do with, managing finances can be really tough. That's where JS Medical and Dental Finance comes in. Specializing in financing options tailored to medical and dental professionals, JSMDF is a completely independent broker dedicated to finding the best bank and lender for your unique situation. led by the incredible Jason Savage, who personally came to my rescue and worked his magic and helped me secure a loan before I even started working. JSMDF is committed to supporting you throughout your personal and professional journey in whatever way you need. Whether you're looking to buy a house, a car, a practice, or pay off that year-long CPD course you signed yourself up for, JSMDF offer comprehensive advice tailored to your short and long-term plans. Their goal is to be with you from day one and thoroughly understand your financial needs and provide solutions that best work for you. And so if you're looking for some advice or you simply want to explore your options, get in touch with Jason and his team. A big thank you to JSMDF for helping make being an adult that extra bit easier and for supporting the graduate dentist community.
So yeah, I like the nurse to bring the patient to me, and then I'll introduce myself. I'm usually, I'll stand up for them, say hi, etc., have a seat, introduce myself. Then I'll start explaining what we're going to do today and all of that. But I
Yeah.
forgot what your question was, actually, honestly.
Oh no, it's just how do you introduce yourself? I find that really
Mm.
interesting because I guess the way that I was gonna say been brought up, I guess in some ways been brought up
Yep.
or been taught has always been that I greet my patients from the waiting room and different schools of thoughts. I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think everyone kind of, as we said, you experiment with how everyone else does things. I think and I've had times where like I've worked in practices where the nurses are like, oh, do you want me to go grab them? And I'm like, oh, no, 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 that's my job. And maybe
Yeah.
that's the people pleaser side of me, but I really like being able to be their first point of
Yeah.
call. But I do agree with you with having the DAs really on board and being a big part of it, because I do agree with that. Patients may sometimes feel more comfortable opening up to your DA. And I think we'll talk about it later on as well, is that it's very much a team effort. It's not just dentist and the patient. Like, we wouldn't be where we are today and we wouldn't be able to do what we do if it wasn't for reception and if it wasn't for our nurses as well. So I can see the benefits of that as well. And I
Oh,
don't know, maybe it's something to
the main
try, but
caveat
yeah.
there is to make sure you're the one taking your patient out to the reception.
Okay.
So you don't
Yeah,
just
that
let
was
them
actually,
walk out. Yeah, you're the one who
yeah,
has to walk them out and hand over to the reception. And yeah,
yeah.
the handover doesn't have to be like some complicated script. You just say,
Mm,
Mr. Bob did really well today. We want to, really keep an eye out on this tooth. If we can get him
yeah.
in before anything happens to this tooth, I think he said Thursdays were suitable for him. And then you just say, Bob, I'm going to hand you over to reception. They're going to take good care of you. That's it. And then you just walk away like, thank you. All right, bye. That's it. It doesn't have to be like
Yeah.
this weird three-way dynamic situation, because I've done pretty much all the communication courses, and some of it is
Mm,
like, look, reception is busy. They've got patients, phone is ringing, all of this is happening,
mm.
and you're trying to have this like three-way huddle that takes 10 minutes to do. It should just flow naturally. So sort of what I try to teach is your communication should flow naturally. You shouldn't be thinking, okay, I've done step one in my communication list. What is step two? Because then it's never going to flow. It's just keep it simple.
But you would agree, I think we would both agree on that, that handover of
Mm.
you walking your patient out is really crucial. Like, don't just
100%.
let them walk out the
100%.
door and not know what's going on,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The question I was originally asking was, how do you introduce yourself? And the reason why I wanted to bring that up was because I think a common question grads get, particularly when you're not confident and you're trying to remember your script and what you're meant to say and what happens next,
Mhm.
and your patient's asking you, oh, so how long have you been doing this for? How long have you been practicing dentistry?
Yeah.
Did you ever figure out what your response was to that question?
I never actually got asked that question
I
because
was gonna
I
say,
look
did you get
old.
asked that question?
I got a beard and everything, so I look older.
Yeah.
But a good way is to play it off as a joke and just be like, "Oh, too long," you know? They're not gonna be like, "No, but actually how long?" Unless they actually wanna know. But then obviously you have to be honest, but you can say, if you did a 5-year course, it's like, "Yeah, I've been training for 5 years." You
Mm.
technically
Well, I usually say, like, I've been in dentistry for
Yeah, yeah,
5
you could say
years,
that. Yeah,
right?
yeah. Like I've
Mhm,
trained
mhm.
5 years or I've been in dentistry for that long.
Yeah.
You don't have to be like, "Oh, I just graduated in December." Yeah.
But I think because I do get asked the question a lot, but I think it's maybe, like you said, redirecting it. And I think if you focus too much on it or you get squeamish or get squirmy about it, then patients pick up on it. But it's just palming it off as like, oh, it's not a big deal. People's like, oh, Erica, how long have you been doing this for? I'm like, oh, number of years.
Yeah.
And just moving on.
Yeah, then yeah,
Right?
just
And I
yeah,
think you,
100%.
mm,
Just
I thought I just asked that.
no,
Yeah.
that's probably a better way to do it, but you can joke
Mm.
about it and then just, yeah, so how can I help
Mm-hmm.
you today? And then, move
Mm.
on. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't spend too long and then take out your degree and then show them. Yeah,
The more you have to justify it, the less confidence you're building, right?
100%. Yeah. So do not
Yeah.
justify
Okay.
it.
Sure, sure, sure. So that's communication, and let's
Mhm.
move on. What's your next golden nugget for
Okay,
us?
let's jump
Mhm.
ahead. The next one is about money. Oh,
We mentioned that before.
cool.
It's such a dirty word or such a uncomfortable thing in dentistry.
100%. I know dentists get a bit
Mm,
funny. I probably feel the
mm,
anxiety build up talking about money, especially as a new grad. I know I had a lot of
mm,
anxiety talking about money as a new grad. It's always, if you ask somebody, what's the root of all evil? Everyone says money, and it's got
mm,
this really negative connotation. But honestly, money is just something that we use to
mm,
exchange value. Like
mm,
there's a lot of emotion attached to it. And we'll talk about why that's not great in dentistry to have emotion tied to money. But it's all about having a balance with money. And how you know you have had a balanced money transaction is the patient is happy to pay the amount that you're charging and you're happy to receive that amount. So if I'm doing a
mm-hmm.
root canal for $1, I'm not going to be happy. The patient's going to be happy. I'm not going to be very
Yeah.
happy. But if it's vice versa and I'm charging 100 grand for a root canal, I'm going to be really happy, but the patient is not. It's
Mm,
about finding that balance between the two. And yeah, you really want to make both parties happy. The other thing about
mm-hmm.
money is we cannot operate as a dental clinic or as an associate without money. Like if I was like,
Mm,
Erica, you're not going to get paid for any of the work for the next 10 years, you'd be homeless by the end of it. So it's very
mm-hmm.
important that we don't make our sole purpose money because that's how you burn out
Mm-hmm.
really quickly. But we
Mm.
also have a balanced view of it and not letting our emotions also dictate how we talk about money. Do you have any experience with that at all? Or
Yeah, you made me think of it when you mentioned just like it's an exchange for value. And I think this term value was something that I perhaps didn't quite understand when I first started working. And I think it's easy for new grads just to see like your work
Mm,
and the dollar amount and see them as like that's it. Like filling $250 or like crown 1,700, whatever it is. And you're just like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, my feeling doesn't deserve. I think that's a word, right? Like my feeling and my work does not deserve that amount. And we kind of just see it as like the commodity and the dollar amount. And I remember having this conversation with my boss, perhaps in my first couple of months, where I was telling him I had a patient that came in inquiring about whitening.
mm,
And she'd asked us like, oh, how much the in-chair whitening was. And then she's just like, yeah, just was really defensive. And she's just like, no, like, you guys are such a ripoff. She was just like really, really like argument. She's like, no, you guys are such a ripoff. Like, I go somewhere else and they do it for like a fraction of the cost.
mm.
And me being a new grad and perhaps fixating on the actual what's the word? Like this treatment
Yeah,
itself, being like, oh, but you have to make sure that where you get it is it TGA approved or is it a professional that's doing it?
yeah.
And what's the concentration? And you're thinking about all like the rationale to it.
Mm,
And she was just like, no, like, and she was just arguing. And I'm like, I don't know how to resolve this conversation. And I remember talking to my boss about it, and he just said, well, at the end of the day, it's she did not see the value in what you were providing. And it wasn't necessarily just the service or the whitening itself, which is that he was talking about how like value is your overall experience. It's beyond just the treatment itself. It's your how you made the patient feel, your interactions, the clinic, how all the other staff members were. And it's like if someone feels like their overall experience, it felt valuable to them, then they're willing to pay that amount. And then I then started thinking about like, oh, it's like when you go to a restaurant, right? And you can go to a really beautiful restaurant where the service is phenomenal, the food's incredible, and you just had such an enjoyable experience. Even if it's a little bit more, you're paying a bit of a premium, you feel like it's worth it because of everything, right? As opposed to like you could have
KFC.
food. Yeah. You could have food that's like $1, right? But
Mm,
if it tastes crap
mm.
and the service is awful, then it's just like it could have been free and you still wouldn't have enjoyed
Yeah.
yourself. So I think that started putting into context like value for me
Mhm.
and perhaps maybe a little bit more comfortable with like, okay, this amount isn't just for the product, right? It's how you made your patient feel. And if, like you said, they feel like it's a fair exchange,
Mm,
then neither party should be uncomfortable with it, right?
100%. I think letting your emotions dictate your treatment plans is one of the main issues that I see with new grads, including myself when I was a new grad. That's why I see it often. I, at this stage of my career, believe it's if you're letting emotions dictate what treatment you offer, it is,
Mm,
I wouldn't say small, but it is unethical not
mm,
to offer the patient the best care. Okay. Because you're
mm,
sort of robbing them of that comprehensive care option. And I've got, a case where I did that. That's the next slide that we'll talk about. But you should really be offering the patient the best option every single time and leaving your judgments about them or your own judgments about money out of it. It's easier said than done. Like I'm saying it now, but I've been out a few years. But obviously, if you're a new grad, it's really hard. But
mhm,
let's just say your patient needed 4 crowns, but you looked at them and you were like, oh, and then you're like, oh, 4 crowns is a lot of money. It's nearly 8 grand. I don't know.
mm,
Maybe I'll just offer 2 crowns. And then
mm,
my question to that is, what happens if one of the two teeth that you didn't offer the crowns on broke and the patient, they were willing to do 4 crowns, but you just didn't offer that option because of your own feelings about money? Who's responsible for that crown breaking? Like, eh, that's what my dilemma is. And by not telling patients that there's something wrong there, it's a very common mistake that I see. And a lot of assumptions are made when it comes to money and patients. And I was guilty
mm,
of that. A real world
mhm,
example I think we talked about last time was if you're going
mm.
to a mechanic and let's just say all
Yeah.
4 of your brakes need to be changed. And they look at you and they're like, oh, that's going to cost a bit. So what we'll do is we'll just do 2 of the brakes and we'll leave the other 2. It'll be right. And then you get into a car accident. Are you
Yeah.
to blame or is the mechanic to blame because they judged you based off your
Yeah.
appearance? So that's sort of like another real life example. I know dentists love mechanic examples. Yeah. So that's sort of another way to spin it.
Mhm,
Now,
mhm.
the case that I was talking about, I'll just jump to the next slide here, was my first
Yeah.
case. And I, this was, I was so proud of this composite rehab that I did. I think it was my first or second year out. It looks very average now looking at it, but
Mhm.
back then it was really good. I showed my mum the pictures and she said, ew. And it was a good time all round. But
Mhm.
this guy came in, and for the viewers, it's just a bunch of erosion everywhere, and OVD's collapsed. He needs a full mouth rehab, in summary.
Mm.
And I remember looking at this guy, and he was, track pants, flip flops, holes in the t-shirt, and I was like, oh, this guy can't afford proper, indirect restorations. So I was like, you know
Mhm.
what? We'll just do composites everywhere, and it'll be cheap. And I remember I discounted these composites down to like $200. So I did the full rehab.
Mhm.
I don't know. You need to count the number of teeth, but it was really
Mhm.
cheap. And I didn't even really offer him the indirect option, or I might have just skimmed over it because I was like, "Oh, you can't afford
Mhm.
this anyway, so we'll move on." And I was really judgmental back then. And this is one of the cases I honestly regret every time I look at because I've robbed this
Mm.
patient of the opportunity for comprehensive care. Now, he's probably gotten it by now because all my composites probably fell out. I was funding it purely to dentine, but that's sort of the point of it is you really want to not make assumptions and offer the patient the best care. This patient
Mm.
actually turned out to be one of the higher ups at one of the ASX 200 companies. So he could have
Mm.
100% afforded indirect treatment. Whether I
Yeah.
had the skills to do it at the time, probably not. But uh,
Mhm.
yeah, that's one of the things is you don't want to rob people of the opportunity for perfect care.
I think building on from what you were saying, like it being a struggle for new grads is I think dental school instills a fear in
Yes,
us
strong
of
fear.
over diagnosing.
Mm,
And we do all those like dental law lectures where they talk to us about this person got sued because they did a root canal and a crown on every single patient and they're unethical and
mm.
yada, yada, yada. And so I don't know. I feel like, at least me, myself, but I feel like a lot of other people would feel that way. It's just we have this fear of being an unethical dentist for overdiagnosing. And perhaps a combination of that, but also us undervaluing our work and a combination of that and also projecting our own insecurities. And, we're new grads, we can't afford things ourselves. So projecting, our own financial abilities and judging a patient for their appearance or making assumptions about that. Like all of those things almost form like the perfect storm. And I think we end up severely underdiagnosing and undertreating our patients, or at least not offering them the best options when we could have. But it's hard.
It's very hard. It's a lot easier said than done at the start. I know we're talking like it's nothing, like, oh, I just offer everything. but you build up a tolerance to it. So don't, your first patient on what's today, first patient tomorrow, and you need a mouthful of crowns. It's something you build
Mhm.
up to. And I think as your skills develop, you get more confident, you talk more about money.
Yeah.
The more you talk about money, the more comfortable you get talking about it.
I see you've brought up the next slide as well, which is basic numbers and stuff. But
Mhm.
I remember when I first graduated, like the cost of a filling was so scary, right? And you're
Mhm.
like, oh, how do I talk about this? But you do that enough, and as you said, you kind of become desensitized to it. You take out the emotion of it, and it becomes a number as opposed to an emotional, visceral
Mhm.
response, right?
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
100%. But yeah, the basic numbers you should really know, like
Mm,
these you'll learn pretty quickly because you'll see them every day.
mm,
Each practice is different, so I've given a bit of a range, take it as you will. So a crown and a root canal on average is anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000, depending if you're doing it on a molar or a premolar. Now, I've lumped the two together because usually they go hand in hand. But if we separate them out, a crown is usually anywhere from 1.5 to 2 grand, whereas a root
mm,
canal is anywhere usually from 1 to 2. Now, I
mm-hmm.
don't do many root canals, so I don't know if my prices are outdated. I try to do 2 a year so I can remember the steps, but that's about it. Are you a fan of root canals, Erica?
No.
No. Yeah, same.
And I've decided that, going into my third year,
Mm.
I tried for my first and second
Yep.
year, and then going into my third year, I'm like, you know what? Like,
You sound like
there are
me.
people out there that are better than this, who will
Yes.
do a better
Yep.
job and give my patient a better experience than I will. So I will palm it off.
Yep. Yep. Welcome to the club. And
Yeah.
what you'll find actually is your skills in other
Mm,
aspects of dentistry will get quicker, better, or faster.
yeah.
That's the
Hmm.
main thing is you'll level up quicker because you're not wasting time taking 3 hours on a single
But
canal
we'll talk about that,
like
right?
me.
We'll talk about our foundations and like how to upskill and like
Yes.
finding you in areas, right? Mm-hmm.
100%. And then a veneer is
Mm,
another one. It's relatively the same price as a crown, although I think it's a lot
mm,
more technically challenging to do a minimal prep
mm,
veneer than a crown. So
mm-hmm,
1.5 to 2.
mm-hmm,
Fillings and exos. Please, 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 new grads, always quote a range. Never give a
mm,
fixed number because
mm-hmm,
you might look at an exo and be like, oh, this is going to be simple. And then you start and you're 2 hours in and your hand has gone
mm.
numb and you're like,
Yeah.
damn it, I quoted $100.
Yeah.
So always quote a
Mhm.
range, usually exos, depending if your preferred provider, which we'll get into later,
Mm,
150 up to like 650 if you're doing a really complex wisdom tooth or something. So
mm,
always quote this range. You can obviously narrow down the range if you sort of know, but don't ever give a single figure. Same with
mm,
fillings. You might think it's an MO, but it turns out, the caries really undermined a cusp and you needed to cusp cap. So always
mm,
quote a range for fillings as well. It gives you that flexibility.
mhm,
And if you go below the upper end of the range, because really that's what the patient hears. If you say 4 to 600, they hear 600. If you at the end of the treatment tell them like, oh, it was a bit smaller than I thought, it was 500, they're really appreciative. That's something I learned the hard way. So always honor whatever you
Yeah.
quote. All it takes is one patient where you're like, oh, I need to charge more than 100 for this exo, and then they freak out at the front desk. So always,
Yeah,
always
and
quote
it's
a
not
range.
fair for front desk as
Yeah,
well, right?
yeah.
I think always whenever I treatment plan, like particularly for like an extraction or something, it's always a 3-2-4.
Mm,
Even if you think it's going to be either 3-1-1, but it's always better to tell that to the patient and say like, "Hey, this is worst case scenario if it's really difficult. Hopefully it's not, but obviously it'll be less than that. But it's always better to have quoted them, like you said, that upper range and then not having to hit that rather than underquoting and then having to, add on numbers and then you just look shifty and you look like an untrustworthy patient that's just trying to squeeze,
exactly. That's
right?
the fastest way to lose the trust
Mm,
of a patient is to quote something and then
yeah.
increase it.
Mm,
Implants, now, you won't be really doing too many implants as a new grad.
mm,
Depends where you work, but
mm,
usually it's around 5 to 6K. There's some places that can offer it
mm,
for 4.5 or 4. That's usually the range. Now, the reason you need to know the cost of all these things, even if you don't offer the treatment, is when you're sending a patient to a specialist or to the other dentist that does them, they need to sort of have an idea of the cost. Because there's no point booking an implant consult in with me, for example, when the patient doesn't know what an implant is approximately going to cost. And then I say 5K and they go, what? Just take it out. I don't want this tooth.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
I thought these basic numbers are really important because, like, all throughout uni, I think a lot of us work within the public clinics. So you never have to think about cost. And then you come out and you're like, I don't know how much a filling is, or I don't know how much a crown is. And then when you're having a conversation with a patient, I don't think it's the best look when, you're sitting in front of them and you're talking and then they're like, okay, so how much is a crown? You're like, oh, hang on a second, you have to go to your computer and like type things up.
Yeah.
I think there's like a tactful way of doing it. I think I talked about it with Darren in our communication chat about like, oh, when you're familiarizing and you're learning and you're doing big, particularly like bigger treatment plans, like how to, tactfully have that conversation with your patients. But I think these are like, just key numbers. I remember when I first graduated, I literally like sat down one day and had like a notes app on my phone and just like calculating like, okay, how much is a root canal and how much is a root canal and crown, just so that you can pull those numbers from off the top of your head. You actually mentioned a really good point and as about specialists. And I knew that as a new grad, this was something that baffled me as well, was that, okay, I learned the numbers of what our clinic offered. And actually also want to talk about the differences between what your clinic might offer when you talked about preferred providers before. Get back to that in a moment and put a pin on that. But specialists, I realized, was something that I hadn't realized. It's very easy to send a patient off to the specialist, but I guess could you give us a bit of a rundown for our listeners as to like how much a typical consultation fee would be or how much they typically charge for treatment, and I guess particularly with like oral surgeons or like pediatric dentists if they need to like do hospital admission for like GA and stuff, like those rough numbers just so that our listeners may know?
Yeah. So with specialists, the fees can be actually very hard to decipher because I've seen massive ranges. So I wouldn't actually quote for the specialist, but usually consults are at least $100, like bare minimum, because
Mhm.
they need to take their own
Mm.
x-rays. Even if you send them x-rays, a lot of them will still take an x-ray to double check, especially
Mhm.
endos. So they'll take an x-ray, they'll do their consult, they run through it with the patient, and they do invest a lot of time, the specialist, to talk about it. Because usually if you're sending somebody to a specialist, it's a complex case. Like you're not sending a 1-1 exo, which actually can be very difficult. We'll talk about that later. You're not sending them simple stuff, or you're sending them a very difficult patient a lot of the time.
Yep.
That's why the pros hate
Yeah.
me. We're sending them very difficult patients. So they usually have to spend a lot of time. So
Mm.
their consults can sometimes be $300 just to have a chat with
Mhm.
them about something. Oral surgeons will depend. If you're sending them a tooth that they need to take a CBCT for, you need to factor in the cost of the CBCT. The specialist costs also range depending if they work out of their like private offices or if they work out of a hospital. So that
Mhm.
can range things as well. So usually I'm quoting patients or telling them it'll be a couple of $100 for the consult. And by keeping it
Mm.
vague like that,
Yeah.
they don't get
Mhm.
stung with a surprise because
Mm.
you don't want the specialist to look bad either. Like you don't want to say, oh, they'll
Yeah.
do the consult for like $20 and then it turns out to
Mm.
be 300. So
Mhm.
that was, I think, the first part of your question. What was the second part of your question?
I guess like cost of treatment. Would you say it's like a if, for example, right, like if we were to take out, I'm just thinking like a cost of a root canal, right? If we were to say just the root canal itself, excluding the crown,
Hmm.
could be, 1,200 to 2,000, whatever it
Hmm.
may be. Like, would you say specialists, obviously each specialist charges their own fees,
Mm.
but would you say it's a particular percentage more, like 20%
About
more?
20% more usually. Yeah. So if
Mm.
a crown is
Mhm.
like, let's just say 18, 1900, specialists will probably charge
Mm.
2500, 2400. Some will charge more,
Mhm.
some will charge less. It also depends on
Mhm.
the area that your specialist works in. So if they work in like
Yeah.
Bondi Beach, I don't know the areas of Sydney, but I heard Bondi is
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah.
They're gonna be they're gonna be
Yeah.
charging a lot more than a dentist working in,
Yeah.
a specialist working in some rural town. So that'll also depend. So just to be safe, add on at least 20% to your fees. But I always tell patients that it's relatively similar to our fees, but you get a specialist to do it.
And then also there was the hospital admission. That was just something that I learned over time, was just like, oh, particularly with pediatric patients, right?
Mm.
Like if they need to be seen under GA, there's like what, an additional 1,500 just for them to hire out like the theater room. But then getting to know whether your specialist is able to offer GA
Hmm.
services in their own practice or not, like that all
Yeah. And
are things to factor in,
And
right?
I think Medicare covers
Mm.
part of that fee as well.
Okay.
Like it's not purely
Yeah.
on the patient, but it is definitely more expensive.
Mm.
So it can be a motivating factor for parents to really pick up on their child's care as well. Because if you tell them it's going
Mm.
to cost, if we don't brush his teeth,
Yeah.
it's going to cost you 2 grand
Yeah.
later, they're going to start brushing the
Yeah.
teeth.
I just thought it was, yeah, something to be conscious of, but also I guess part of like upskilling as well is like, a big factor of patients wanting to do treatment with us or letting us do it is because they're put off by the fees of the specialist as well, right? And particularly I think from people who work rurally, it ends up being a huge motivating factor because one, specialists are so expensive, but also they're like 5, 6 hours away. And so we
Mm.
typically hear like, a lot of our rural dentists upskilling so rapidly
Hmm.
because they end up taking on these complicated
Yeah,
cases,
and
right?
patients are also more
Mm-hmm.
forgiving in rural.
Yeah, that as well.
100%, because
Mm-hmm.
the other alternative is you drive 5 hours. So they're a lot like, "Oh, I'm happy for you to give it a go, and if it doesn't work, I'll go to a specialist." You also have to be very careful with that on pick and choose your patients, and the other thing is you don't wanna do anything that the specialists will find it very hard to fix. So if you perforate a tooth, for example, like, yeah, the specialist can fix it, but the lifespan of the tooth is reduced. They have to do all this extra work and it's going to end up costing more. So, by you trying to help, you've created more problems. So, I
Mm-hmm.
think going outside of your comfort zone in rural is a lot easier, but it just has to be
Mm-hmm.
in a controlled environment. Like, it can't just be,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to tackle this all
Go
on four.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
100%. All right. Next one is health funds.
Mm.
Okay. There we go.
Actually, that builds on really well
Mm,
because one thing I wanted to bring up, Anas, was that, we talked about fees and we gave us rough ballpark numbers there as well. But one thing that I wish I knew as a grad was going into private practice was that, oh, not every practice charges the same amount, right? And if you're a private clinic, your fees can, vary considerably or depending on the area that you are in, but also whether you're a provider or not. And I guess perhaps you can explain to our listeners like what that means. But then there are also, just to add on, like, things like CDBS and DVA and like government vouchers, like all these acronyms that when I first graduated, I'm like, what do these all mean? And why do we charge everyone different amounts, right?
yes.
Yeah.
So
So
we can start.
tell
Yeah,
us.
we'll start with the health
Mm-hmm.
funds. So everyone, I assume, is familiar with
Mm-hmm.
health funds. They're just private health insurance companies. You pay them premiums and they pay for dental care.
Mm,
Okay, so that's
mm.
pretty much the rundown of it. Preferred providers where you sign an agreement with a health fund company like Bupa, Medibank, etc., that you're
As in
going.
the practice
Oh yeah, the
itself,
practice,
right?
yep.
Yeah.
And then you as a
Mm-hmm.
provider within the practice also sign an agreement that you're going to follow the
Yep.
rules. So you pretty
Mm-hmm.
much will follow their rules and charge their prices, and in exchange, they'll sort of increase your patient flow in a way because they can
Mm.
advertise you on
You're
the
like a
website.
referred, right?
Sort of,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's a exchange of value, you can say. Now, last time I went on a
Mm-hmm.
long rant on this part, so we're going to skip the rant this time and just focus on the
Yeah.
numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So item numbers are the same. So health funds don't have special item numbers. Their fees are usually a little bit lower than what you would charge normally, and you might notice that in your software where you pick like a Bupa patient versus your
Mm-hmm.
normal standard fees, it'll be a lot lower, or depending on where you work, some
Mm-hmm.
amount lower. And
Mm-hmm.
that's because of the agreement that the practice and you have signed with the health
As a
provider.
preferred
Yeah,
provider.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's
Mm-hmm.
a give and take. You can't, have both sides. Can't have increased patient flow in
Mm-hmm.
that. And the
Mm-hmm.
implications of that is, as a new grad, you get a lot of new patients, and
Mm.
you get to hone your skills quickly. It is a more rapid environment, usually, preferred provider clinics. Some are a little bit slower, some are a little bit quicker, but it's a different type of practicing dentistry. Same overall procedures, it's just done usually in a little bit more efficient manner. So that's the trade-off as a new grad is you get more experience. However, because the fees are a little bit lower, you might feel pressured or rushed sometimes
Mm.
to try, especially if you're focused in on the numbers, to try to speed things up. Be
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm only getting $100 for this exo. Let me try to yank it out real quick. That's usually a
Mm.
mistake, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
um, so that's sort of the difference. Personally, obviously, it's the opposite style of the dentistry I preach or practice. So to me, it's not a selling point, but as a new grad, I can definitely see how this could be appealing. And I think, Erica, you'd be able to speak a bit more about it.
This remind because yeah, I guess the opposite, right? You working in a private clinic, whereas I do work within a preferred provider clinic. And I had a really interesting discussion with one of the more senior dentists when I first joined the
Hmm.
practice. She was leaving, and it was just like a candid conversation about like, oh, what's this next chapter looking like for you? Or I guess as someone who's about to join a practice and she's about to leave, it's just like, why are you leaving? Right? Like, what am I missing?
Yeah.
Um, and but she had said to me, and just honestly, like she'd been there since she was a grad, and just like you had said, she says as a grad working within a preferred provider was excellent because she just had this steady inflow of patients, and particularly as someone who when we keep coming back to that same concept, and that's where you're not super confident and you're not really sure whether you're like undervaluing your work and all that. I guess working within a preferred provider practice where fees are a little bit less, or their health fund covers a big portion of the cost of treatment, it ends up reducing that barrier, like the cost barrier
Mm.
for patients to, jump across the line. And so it's a really great environment for growth, right? And for you to just work on honing your skills. But she had said, much like you reach a point in your career, and maybe everyone's a little bit different. Some people may never find an issue with it, or depending on the type of dentistry you want to do. But she had said she was at a point in her career where she wanted to, I guess, take more time to do bigger cases, but then not have to worry about whether it was profitable or not have to worry about, being capped at certain prices, as being having the freedom, I guess, to charge however she wanted, but for the high quality work that she was doing. And so she felt that it was time to move on to, I guess, a different practice and perhaps a little bit more specialized work, as opposed
Mhm.
to, yeah, a preferred provider. So I think pros and cons of each. Like, I enjoy it. I feel like it's serving me at this
Mhm.
point in my
Mhm.
career, but things may change, right?
Yeah, we'll get you over
Mhm.
to the dark
Mhm.
side soon, don't worry.
Yeah.
But I think you also mentioned
Mm,
a really kind of bonus tip there is asking the
mm,
dentist that's leaving why they're leaving. You'll
yeah.
get very honest answers a lot of the time. All right, so next one is having solid foundations.
Yeah.
Now, this one is very, very important, and I've got sort of a story to illustrate this. And one of my friends works in, let's just call it a Melbourne suburb, and they've recently hired one of the newer intakes of new grads. Now, this new grad, just like all of us when we first graduated, is still struggling with extracting teeth. And they've had to sort of bail them out a few times. I know I've been bailed out a few times as a new grad, but after having a chat with them, they're like, "Oh, I'm going to do this overseas course." And he's like, "Oh, what's the course about?" And he's like, "I'm going to learn how to do all on fours." And you really need to be able to crawl before you can walk, and to walk before you can run. So, if you need to really master the foundation for dentistry, which
Mm,
is extractions
mhm,
relatively atraumatically, endo
mhm,
just
mhm.
until you can pawn it off, like us two.
Yep. Yep.
Or at least extirpating teeth.
Yep. It's the bare
Restorations,
minimum.
yeah,
Yep.
restorations
Mhm,
with class 2 are still a nightmare, and
mhm,
basic pros, so 1 or 2 crowns.
mm,
These 4 things need to be, solidly built before you start thinking about things like all on 4 implants, rehabs, all of the complex stuff, all of the stuff that you see on Instagram. I think this one's a reiterated point by many experienced dentists, and it just gets, glossed over by new grads like I did. But
yeah.
if you're getting bailed out of one of these procedures, unless it
Yeah.
was a really complex one, then usually you really shouldn't be doing more complex treatment because you're going to get yourself in trouble. Luckily, I haven't. I made it through. But please, 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 the last thing you want is for you to have, some sort of APRA complaint early on in your career. So that was just the solid foundation. Did you have anything to add at all, Erica?
Yeah, in our Discord recently, we had one of our members, one of our new grads,
Mm,
who 1 week into work, and he said, "Oh, what was it?" He was asking about CPD courses,
mm,
and he's like, "Oh, I was like, running late, and like this, that, and the other." He's just like, "What CPD should I do?" And yeah, it made me think about this whole. Oh, and then like maybe someone else had mentioned like, oh, their first week of work and they perforated a tooth, and like, what endo courses should I do, right? What are your thoughts on CPD you should do early on? And at what point do you think you should be looking into doing CPD? Is it like if you perforate a tooth on your first day, it means you need to do endo CPD
mm.
straight away? Like, thoughts on
Yeah,
that,
so
Anas?
it's again a balanced
Mm,
approach. If you do too much
mm,
CPD at once, you learn nothing.
yep,
Okay,
yep.
so that's
Mm-hmm,
a very, very common one. If you do an exo, endo, pros, everything
mm,
at the same time, it's information overload. You don't have time to digest and practice what you just
mm,
learned. So it ends up
mm,
just being notes in the cupboard, and I've got plenty of those.
yeah, yeah.
So
Mm-hmm,
that's very, very important. The main one I would start with is communication, because you are going to make mistakes, and being able to explain what's happened, get informed consent, etc., is much, much more important than being able to do an endo. Okay. Because you can be the best at endos, but if the patients don't like you, you're screwed. So 100% learning how to talk is very, very important. And it doesn't have to be scripted like we talked about. It can be very
mm-hmm,
natural, but you just need some frameworks when you're discussing exos, endos, etc. So
mm-hmm,
number one thing would be do something related to communication. Number 2 would be, depending on what you want to learn, it can be hard when you're a new grad because you're like, "Oh, I think I'm interested in endo." oh, exos seem cool. So everything seems interesting. So personally, I wouldn't advise investing in a 2-year course right at the start, because
Mm,
there's been a lot of examples of people investing in a 2-year ortho course and they turns out they hate ortho and then it's just
mm,
wasted money. So
mm-hmm.
the weekend courses, I know they get a lot of flack, but they're a good foot in the door.
Introduction.
Yeah, good intro. You might do an ortho introductory course and be like, oh, this is not for me. And then you've only,
Yeah.
you've at least learned something where when you refer
Mm.
a patient to an orthodontist, you don't sound like you don't know what you're talking
Stupid.
about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So doing a lot of the basic stuff, and that's what I try to do with my courses. I try to cover all the basics, give you a rundown. It can be honestly overwhelming if you're fresh out. So I would really advise focusing in on communication and then going from there, doing some weekend courses here and there, finding an area that you're interested in, then picking something longer,
Yeah.
particularly with complex treatment. If you're going to be doing implants, please don't start doing implants after like one weekend course. Just start smashing them out.
Yeah.
Doing an implant is actually very, very easy. And I know this will step on some toes. You cut the gum, you drill a hole, you make it bigger, and you plug it. That's it. And if you don't know the treatment planning behind it, what to do if something goes wrong, etc., like the complications and how to manage them, that's when you run into trouble, not the actual
Mm,
placement of the implant.
mm.
Yeah.
There is so much we want to learn as new grads that dental school doesn't expose us to. One thing, of course, being the world of clear aligners. But where do we even start? Fortunately for me, I've been lucky to be taken under the wings of Angel Aligner. With over 20 years of experience in innovation and research and over 1 million smiles transformed, Angel stands as the second largest aligner company in the world for volume. With their competitive pricing, rapid turnaround time, and phenomenal support team, Angel is second to none. Last year, I had the unique experience of taking on my very first aligner case whilst undergoing aligner treatment myself. And it is so fascinating being able to experience treatment firsthand and fully understand the ins and outs of what my patients are going through as well. It was such a streamlined process from start to finish. Angel's iOrtho treatment planning software is incredibly user-friendly, particularly for a grad. Their team, overseen by trained dentists and orthodontists, work tirelessly around the clock to deliver your treatment plans within days, sometimes hours, so you aren't stuck waiting around for weeks on ends to deliver your patient care. High quality and with unique scalloped edges that make them both hygienic and super comfortable to wear, both my patients and I have been so pleased with the experience. Thank you, Angel Aligner, for guiding me through the world of clear aligners and for supporting the Graduate Dentist podcast. I feel like it's easy when I was reading all those comments from the grads where they're like, oh my God, I did this. I need to go do a course. What CPD do I do? I'm like, it's okay. And take a bit of a breather. And my thoughts is that like when people say like what CPD you should do early on, I've done a lot of CPD
Mm,
and I would agree with you that I think communication at any point in your career, even as students, is the one thing that you can't go wrong.
mm,
Like I don't think you can go wrong doing too many communication
mhm,
at any point in your career.
mhm,
But yeah, I think a lot of the other courses that I had done, particularly in my first year, I realized that for endo, for example, it wasn't that I needed to know more about endo to know how to do endo.
mhm.
It was more that I just needed to do more endo.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mhm,
Right. So it's like, to be fair, like what I realized, like going to those weekend courses or going to those, it's like, hang on a second. A lot of what you're teaching me
mhm,
is what I learned in dental school,
mhm.
right? And like as a new grad, all of that information is the most fresh in our mind because we literally just graduated from dental school and
Yeah.
we have the most like up to date of just like, what uni taught us. But I figured that a lot of the things that we get stuck with, right, is just troubleshooting. And the more you do it, the more you end up just figuring out how to do those things that no course could possibly teach you. You just have to do it. And I think a topic that comes up a lot on the podcast is like confidence and competence, right? The only way you become confident is by being competent, becoming more competent, like vice versa,
Yeah.
right? Just you just got to do it. No amount of learning will ever make you
Mhm,
confident or make you competent, just experience will. So I would say like the first 6 months, just like be easy on yourself, learn from the practice,
mhm.
learn from senior mentors, have people that are willing to bail you out, but you don't necessarily need to jump in and do courses straight away. And I would also argue that you probably don't gain that much out
Mhm,
of it because you don't have enough cases and clinical experience to understand what the presenter is
mhm.
talking about. Whereas I'm sure, like, even nowadays, if I were to go to a course and a more senior dentist were to attend the same course, they would get so much more out of that presentation because they know more and they have more cases that they're thinking about in the back of their head and can clinically apply it, as opposed to me where it's just like, oh, this is all theoretical and what ifs, right? Would you agree, Anas?
100%. I think
Yeah.
because you don't know what you don't know when you're
Yeah.
bombarded with information at a course,
Mm.
some of it you'll know because it's not
Mm.
like they're reinventing the wheel. Like if you do a pros
No.
course, prepping a crown is
Mm.
prepping a crown. um,
Yeah.
but the more experience you have, the better it is. I definitely
Mm.
agree with you. If you are going to do a course, just keep it a low investment type of course at the start. It might make you feel better after you perforate a tooth, but honestly, it's picking not so difficult patients and not so
Yeah.
difficult cases and doing a lot of
Yeah.
those before you move on to not so difficult patients and slightly more difficult, you know. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's
Like endo, for example. Oh, sorry to
mm, mm,
interrupt,
mm.
Anas. But I was thinking like endo, like talking about how much I hated endo. But I remember in like my first, maybe I was that example that I was talking about. But I think within my first month, I had perforated a
Mhm.
tooth. I was like, oh, damn, I need to learn how to do endo better,
Yeah.
right? But no course really helped me. It was just, I ended up, even struggling with premolars. And then I ended up just being like, I made a call where I said, you know what, I'm not even going to try touching molar endo. I'm just going to focus on anterior and premolar endos. And I did that for like a good half year. And then I was like, okay, I'm actually kind of comfortable now. I know my steps. I can get the x-ray holder in, like figure that out. And then I don't know whether it was just manifesting it into the universe, but then there was this period of time where like every single week I was doing a lower molar endo. It was like the exact same tooth. It was like a 3-6 after 3-6 after
Mm.
3-6 after 3-6 and just kept doing them. And then you see the different anatomy and you see the different, and you learn to navigate that and you get that down pat. It's just that experience, like you said, there's repetitions, and then it's like, oh, now you're comfortable with that. Okay, maybe you can try something a bit trickier. I still don't do upper molar endos, and I think whether it's maybe I don't manifest that's because they rarely come into my books. But I'll draw the line there at difficulty
Yeah, I mean, it
level.
does make sense,
Mm,
especially upper sixes.
mm,
Like, it depends what study
mm,
you look at. I don't know if there was
yeah,
one I was reading, it was like 90%, there's an MB2 or something.
yeah.
I don't know if I would want a 90% failure rates of my endos eventually. So, yeah, I don't
Yeah.
really do upper, I don't even really do
Mm,
endo in general. Anyway,
mm, mm, mm,
so
mm. So next point then,
next
Anas.
point is being
Mm,
humble or your attitude, pretty
yeah.
much. Now, this
Mm-hmm.
is one where I've seen a wide spectrum of
Yeah.
associates that I've
Mm-hmm.
sort of taught, helped, mentored, etc., whatever you want to call it. It's a big bell curve, and you've got
Mm-hmm.
people on either end. You've got the people that graduate super confident and the people that
Mm-hmm.
graduate super shy. Now, I was
Mm,
more on the confident end, not rightfully
mm.
so. And there's people on the other side. Now,
Mm,
I reckon being more confident overall at the start is actually a good thing. Okay. For your patient interactions, not a good thing for what
mm,
happens clinically. Being a bit too shy and too reserved, etc. Patients can sense that. They're like, oh, does he know what he's doing? I'm not sure. But it's more about how fast you can learn. And both ends of the spectrum learn slower than people in the middle. Because if you're too kind of arrogant or cocky, etc., then you know best and you're almost impossible to teach until you get humbled by some sort of experience. But if
yeah.
you're on the other end where you're too shy, reserved, you don't really think your skills are that good, then your confidence is so low that you don't actually try things to learn. Do you
Mm,
get what I mean? So both,
yeah.
and you'd never want to be at the extreme of a bell curve.
Mhm.
And that's where the next chart comes in, which is the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I'm sure
Mm,
everyone's heard about Dunning-Kruger and his research,
mhm.
but the main thing is with the chart, you can see right at the start, you're at the peak of Mount Stupidity. Is what they've called it on here. And that's when
Mhm.
you're the most confident, most arrogant, like, oh, my work is the best, because you've never seen your stuff fail, because you've only been
Mm,
practicing, I don't know, 3 months.
mhm.
And that's when this confidence can get you into a lot of trouble until you
Mhm.
reach the valley of despair. Now, the
Mhm.
faster you can go from Mount Stupid to Valley of Despair, the better it is for
The
your
better.
career. Because when
Mhm.
you're at the Valley of Despair, this is where I love it when associates come to me. Not that they're in the Valley of Despair, but that they're ready to learn.
You sound mean and
A
nasty.
little bit,
Like,
but
oh, you are ready now, right?
yes, you are. Yes, because I was there once,
Mm,
and it's not
yeah.
fun, but
Mhm.
there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Like it's when you
Yeah.
actually start learning. If you catch an associate at the peak of Mount Stupid, there's no point. Just come back in 6 months, and
Mm.
hopefully they'll be they'll be ready. when you're in the valley of despair, that's when we can start building you up. You're at the bottom.
Mm.
There's only one way up from here. And it usually
Mm-hmm.
happens after you perforate a tooth or something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Not referring to you, but uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's usually after something like that happens, and you want that
Mm.
stuff to honestly happen early in your career. You don't want to
Yeah,
be
100%.
10 years out and nothing, you've been moving practices, so you think you're top shot, and
Mm.
your work is absolutely terrible. Every practice you leave has things failing
Mm.
left and right, but you think you're great.
Mm. Mm.
Because then if somebody is like, look, your fillings aren't that great, that's when your ego can get involved and be like, no, I've been in practice 10 years and everything is perfect. Yeah. So that's where you
Mm.
run into trouble with the Dunning-Kruger effect. I don't know. Where do you think you are on here?
I think I hit Valley of Despair pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
good.
And I think I agree with you about how I don't know. I'd like to think that, or maybe this is just like the mentality, or like I think part of the reasons why I really liked my boss and clicked with him and like ended up taking on the job to work together with him was very early on. He said this phrase that really stuck with me, and he's just like, you have to see problems as gifts, right? As opportunities to learn
Mm.
and grow, right? And that was it. It's just like it's very easy to be in the valley of despair or to perforate a tooth and just feel like this is the end of the world. But then I like how you kind of took it and flipped that and you said, this is the best time. Because once you hit the valley of despair, it's like you are now ready to learn. The
Yes.
only way is up. And right. So it's like that taking that positive to it. It's just like it sucks when you feel like you are incompetent and you are stupid and you can't do anything right. But you take the flip side of it, it's just like, yes, but that is where you are at the best point to build up. Right. And so I guess that's a really nice way of flipping it and thinking about it. How I often see my journey, and as we talked about this last time as well, Nas, is that my Dunning-Kruger graph, or the way that I see it, is like, yes, you go up to peak of Mount Stupid and you come down to the Valley of Despair, and then they talk about the slope of enlightenment. But I would argue that it's not a like consistent linear growth. It's more of like you go up a little and then you slide back down and then you go up a little bit more and then you come back down and you go up a little bit and you come back down, because that's where I feel like
Yeah.
I'm at, where I'll make progress. I'm like, oh, I know more about this. And then something else happens. I'm like, I know nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm going to go learn more about it.
Yeah.
And then you make a little bit more progress. It's like, nope, I still don't know anything. And you kind of slide back down.
Exactly.
But I like to think that like each time you're going up a bit more and sliding down a little bit less. I hope.
Yeah, you don't really realize how far up the slope you are until you look back. That's why taking pictures of your work is very good, because then you look back and you're like, ugh. Yeah. So Dunning-Kruger.
Speaking of that, actually, and it's like, what other recommendations do you have for, I guess, what's the word, documenting or recording, tracking your own growth and progress? You mentioned just then photography. Like, can you expand a bit more on that?
Yeah, with photography, I've seen some pretty all right pictures on like iPhones if you don't want to invest in a full setup. But
Yeah.
taking pictures is very, very important because it lets you see a lot more when you're looking at a picture. So that's why, like, when I'm doing, for example, ortho records, I'll obviously have a look in the mouth, but when I look at the pictures, there's a lot more that I can spot that I didn't see when I was looking in the mouth. And same with your work. You might think your composites look great. For example, you just did some anterior composite veneers. You take a picture and you're like, ooh, what is that? Because then you can see the line angles, you can see the details. You can, oh, there's a void there. I didn't see that. So taking pictures is very important. Now, I can get into like what setup you should get if you want something really basic or anything like that, but we can skip through that.
That was okay. I was mostly, I guess, like talking about the using it as a tool for growth, and how else as new grads can we track our own growth? Like, photography is one thing, but how else do we see ourselves improving, or what other tips do you have for, I guess, improving faster? Right, like photography really forces you. The photo doesn't lie. When you blow it up 100 times, you're just like, oh, I see everything. And I think that really forces you to upskill faster, because it's not like you do it and then you never see it again. Like it's there. It's like immortalized.
Yeah. Yeah. So pictures definitely help. Another one is staying at the same practice for some period of time. Like if you're leaving every 2 months, then you have no idea how your work is traveling along. There's nothing more humbling than when your composite breaks or something happens like that, because then you're like, okay, why did this break? Oh, I didn't, despite there's a plunging cusp, should have adjusted that or something. So yeah, I think those are the main two: photography and staying at a workplace long enough to see some failures. At least, please stay longer than a year, unless it's a terrible workplace, then you should leave. But a lot of the time, about a year is when you see early failures. You're
The other
smiling. I
day,
feel like you.
yeah. No, the other day, it just reminded me the other day, during Christmas, one of my associate, like the other dentists that work within our practice, we both graduated in the same year,
Mm.
but he was seeing one of my patients for me. And I was just like, oh, like, how'd she go? And he's just like, oh, yeah, she was good. And she's got a couple of buccal restorations that need to be done. I'm like, yeah, she's got a few shoddy ones. And then he's like, I'm pretty sure you did them. And I'm like, I know, that's why they're shoddy.
Yeah.
I'm like, I will replace them for her. Just book her back in with me.
Yeah.
But you don't know, right? Like, unless you see those come back. And so those recalls, like I'm now at that point in my career, right? Like being going into my third year where it's like, oh, you're 2 yearly, like bite wings, like are due now. And you see things and I'm like, oh, who did that filling? And then I look at the Chinese, I'm like, oh, I did that filling.
Yeah, that's just Bond. That's just Bond.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there, honestly. I don't think any dentist hasn't been there. I think even experienced dentists sometimes take bite wings and they're like, oh, that's why class 2, honestly, I'm telling you, it's slept on. It's difficult.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll jump to lab next. Now, lab, I
Yeah.
think, is one that's not talked about enough. Let me just flip this through.
I really like that you brought this up because I feel like it's something we don't actually ever touch on. But I really liked your points on, I guess, building on this point of feedback and like learning and reflection, right?
Yeah. So 100% labs are your number one source of feedback when it comes to pros or anything that you send to them. If you find a lab technician that's not afraid to hurt your feelings because they're worried they'll lose your business, then you will learn a
Yeah.
lot quicker than a lab technician who like hypes you up and gasses you up, like, oh, you're amazing, your preps are great. And then they're slaving away at the lab trying to find your margin. Yeah,
Yeah.
so find a lab that can give you honest feedback and just be relatively blunt. Be like, look, I need to improve. I know my preps aren't the best. Can you tell me what would make your job easier? Because if you make their job easier, then the crown you'll get back will be better. And that's usually the right thing. You can also ask these dental labs about workflows for different things that you want to do. So a dental lab usually has a lot of experienced dentists that send them stuff as well. And you can pretty much understand from the lab how another more experienced dentist that, for example, does rehabs or something more complex works just through the lab technician, especially because they're in charge of a lot of the background work, the wax ups and all of that. And finally, when you're sending stuff to the lab, you have to make sure that you're sending quality in order to receive quality. Don't be quick to blame labs for bad crowns or fits, etc. A lot of the time, I would say probably most of the time, is technically the dentist's fault that something doesn't fit or doesn't, sit right. And just try to be nice to your lab. They get a lot of angry dentists. Dentists have fragile egos.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just try to be nice to your lab, get some feedback off them. But I think we covered a lot of the points in the prior one is mostly about feedback.
Yeah. One point I wanted to add to that, Anas, I'm interested to hear your experience with that as well. Like, do you guys use like scanners and
Hmm.
CERECs or things within your practice, right? I remember last year attending the CEREC to Success course with Dr. Lingaya, and he brought up something that I'd never considered, where he said one of the benefits of, I guess, designing your own crowns in-house and milling your own crowns in-house is that you become the lab. And so it's like you become responsible for the quality of your work. And if you did a poor
Hmm.
prep, then you're the one now dealing with it. And I guess it's like the flip side of like if you work with a really good lab, like, even though your margins were terrible, if they're a great technician, like they find your margins or they make things work. Sometimes I remember when as a new grad, like I think there was a couple of crowns that I sent off and I was shocked that it came back retentive. Um, or it came back and they made this beautiful
Yeah.
crown. I was like, wow, like
Turkey
it's just
preps.
magic.
Did you do turkey preps? Yeah. Yeah.
But it was just magic, right? But because of that, it's just like they almost help cover up all of, I guess, the mistakes that you made,
Yeah.
right? Particularly with like you said, a good quality lab or where they've got that experience. But when you do it yourself, then it's just like you have to go fumbling for your
Hmm.
margins, or you have to go fumbling for, the anatomy and shapes. And I remember, I think the sin that all grads commit is we under reduce
Yeah.
our crowns.
Hmm.
Right, because we're so terrified to cut. We think we cut 2 millimeters or like 1.5 millimeters, and it's 0.2.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember like the first few crowns that I had just had cut, and we'd sent it to our in-house mill, and we had some DAs that help us like design the crowns. And I remember just at lunchtime, the DA sitting there, our lab nurse sitting with our senior or principal dentist, and they're just looking at a crown. And she's like, I can't figure out how to make this look nice. It just looks like a pancake. And I was like, oh, what's happening? And then our senior, our principal dentist was just like, yeah, because one of our new grads likes to make our job difficult by under prepping, right? And so that was, I guess made me appreciate it a bit more when you end up having to become responsible for it as well.
CEREC is the fastest way for you to send good work to the lab, is when you do your own lab work and you're like, oh. So then when you do a prep that's meant to go to a lab, you really look at the margins. You're like, can I see the margins? Are they going to find them, etc.? Because there's nothing that will drain your time faster than having to re-prep, rescan, and doing all of that. So doing it right the first time is usually the best option.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, next up is mentorship. So we're still on that topic of improvement.
Learning,
Yes.
It's a common theme of things we wish we knew as grads, right?
There we go. Now, it's honestly the fastest way to learn is through mentorship. You'll have a group of friends when you graduate, and you'll be asking about, what they're learning, etc. a lot of the time. And you'll find that the person that tends to excel is the person that has a really good mentor. They'll tend to excel the fastest, because there's nothing faster than learning from somebody who's already made all the mistakes you're about to make. Because they'll be like, don't do that because this will happen. Don't do that because this will happen. I do it this way because of X, Y, Z. It's really easy to learn that way, because your only other alternative, if you're sort of working on your own, is just to do a crap ton of CPD. And we already sort of talked about doing a lot of CPD isn't always conducive or as good as just having a mentor. Sometimes, the best is probably to do both so you can get an outside perspective. But this mentor doesn't have to be somebody who's like 40 years out and about to retire and they've seen it all, because you'll find that they'll not really relate to you as well. Finding somebody who's just a few years ahead of you is usually better. So if you're first year out, finding somebody who's about 5 years out, 5 to 10, you'll find they'll give you a lot more personalized advice, things that are relevant to you, because they sort of have been in your shoes not too long ago. Whereas if they're 40 years out, dentistry was very different 40 years ago. They might not have some great tips for you, but they can. It's just you'll find definitely more relevant advice. And how has your experience been with mentorship, Erica?
Yeah, 100% agree. It's just like finding someone that you click well with. And I think I've spoken about it previously in other episodes as well. It's like mentorship can't really be, you can't force it, right? And so you have to find someone that like you vibe well with, that you guys get along and you feel comfortable being able to go to them and having just honest conversations. And I think it's both parts, right? Like you yourself have to be humble and open and not defensive and just willing to learn.
I think you should approve this prep. No, I don't. End of mentorship session.
Right? It's just like you can't go asking for mentorship if you yourself are not wanting to be mentored or willing to learn and hear the hard feedback and stuff. But at the same time, you have to find a mentor who's willing to nurture and to grow you and share, and isn't going to judge you for asking questions and whatnot. So it can't always necessarily be forced. And perhaps that's one of the things. It's like, even though a practice may say, oh, we offer mentorship, what's to say that you get along with that mentor? One person, I think everyone has very different mentoring styles as well. And like, I know personally myself, like, I'm that cautious, too scared to do anything kind of dentist. And so sometimes I need my mentors to just being like, just go. Do it, right? Like, push me off of the cliff and it's okay, Erica. Like, you'll be okay. And if it's not okay, we'll come save you. Whereas other people, where perhaps they're a little bit too cowboy, like you need someone that kind of just reins them in a little bit. I just hold them back a little bit, like, hold on, buddy. Like, let's keep things under wraps. But yeah, I think for me, mentorship, it's something I'm really passionate about. But it's just the approach of it. And I think as a mentee, my experience has been, we talked before that like practices will advertise mentorship and everything, but
Every
you have
practice
to,
has mentorship.
every practice offers it, right? And I think every practice has, even if they don't advertise for it, but you need to take the initiative. You can't just sit there in your room waiting for someone to come to you and say, are you ready to be mentored? Right? Like, you think if it's not being delivered, you have to go like find opportunities. And like you said, I think the best form of learning, best form of CPD is just by observing other dentists. And if you have downtime, which you'll have as a new grad or FTAs and whatnot, it's just jumping into their room and just watching how they communicate or how they do things.
Mm.
And it's like the little things that you pick up on that no CPD course will ever teach you, that this is how you hold your probe, or this is how you can use your microbrush, or how you might do your stitches. It's like things that you, only learn by watching.
100%. And if anybody doesn't have a mentor, just contact me and I'll help you on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Or you could come watch if you like. All right. So
Absolutely.
mentorship, I think we've touched on it pretty much like throughout the presentation. Mentorship.
Whole time,
yeah.
right?
The next one I got here, we're up to number 9, people, if in case you're falling asleep.
Yeah, almost
Scheduling.
there.
So scheduling is very, very important. And it's something that a lot of new grads struggle with. You will find that you will run late a lot. And I ran late a lot because you tend to overestimate how quick you go. It's like, oh, yeah, crown insert, 5 minutes, it'll be done. It'll be easy. I'll sit in the chair and it'll just fly in there. So you want to always book 10 to 20 minutes longer than you think it would take, at least, depending on how your time slots work. Running late and being inexperienced is like the easiest recipe for disaster. We'll talk about what happens when you're stressed because you're running late. But what you'll notice throughout your career is you'll go from slow to fast and then back down to slower again, not quite as slow as what you were before. Because as you get faster, you're like, I wonder how fast I can do this prep in. And then you get faster and faster and faster. And then you find that your quality starts to drop off. So then you get slower and you start, you will fluctuate. Exactly. You'll fluctuate throughout your career. And these days I'm booking extra time just so I could chill after. But a lot of the time you will go from being the turtle to being the cheetah. But you really don't want to be trying to be a cheetah when you're brand new and still learning. That's when things go wrong. So I want you to imagine a scenario here. You're taking out this upper, 2-6. It breaks. You've got 3 roots. It's close to the sinus. You're running 20 minutes late. Reception locks on the door and she's like, how long are you going to be? The next patient's been waiting 30 minutes. All that does is it builds up stress. And when you have stress build up, your prefrontal cortex activity gets reduced. And what that literally means is your rational decision making and your ability to control impulses goes down. Okay. You have an increased emotional response. So you start making emotional decisions and things that are a little bit irrational. Okay. It also means that you have impaired memory and attention. So you start being kind of single-minded, tunnel visioned, really, and you don't really consider all possible solutions. So if you've got this broken root, you might not even think to grab a root pick or a file to try to get the roots out. You'll just keep jamming at it until you push it into the sinus, or you wouldn't even think to remove a bit of bone, etc., to take it out. So it's very, very important to not be rushed when you're new, which is why we said avoid focusing in on the money. Because if you start booking less and less time to try to make yourself more efficient, this is how you run into trouble. Has that been any of your experience?
I feel like you just like predicted, like you had like a crystal ball and you were just saying when you said before, like, oh, you start off slow and then you go faster and you go slow again. Because I think when I first started, my practice gave me so much time to do things and I was really lucky. Like I remember my first whole week was just doing hygienes and they gave me an hour to do a hygiene for like a 6-month recall, right? They're just like, just chill, just get used to it. There's no stress. And then when I got comfortable with that, they're like, okay, a filling, and then had a whole hour, like an hour and a half or something to do one filling. It's just like, okay, heaps of time. But then I think the pressure, like you put that pressure on yourself because you're like, oh, the other dentists do it in 40 minutes. Okay, I'll do it in 40 minutes too. But then, without that, they're doing it in 40 minutes because they've got their workflow down pat. But then as a new grad, I don't got my workflow down pat. And to try getting it done in 40 minutes means you're skipping steps. And I think it's like the recipe for disaster as a new grad where you're trying to be efficient by cutting corners. And then you end up building bad habits. And so I know I went through that. And I'm like, actually, even though I'm doing this fast, it's just like, one, I'm not like, it's not fun. It's not fun running late. And it's not fun being stressed and like being back to back with patients. And what I've come to realize, what I was thinking when you were talking, and I was like, no one gives you a medal for being the madman at the practice and just like running around frantic. Like you said before, sometimes you book yourself more time just so you can chill. I'm like, yeah, like you're able to make more rational decision making. You're less stressed. Your DAs don't hate you. If reception doesn't hate you, your patient doesn't hate you. So like, there's no medal for being back to back and running around, right? But then also like the work that I was doing, I'm like, I'm not even happy with this work. This isn't the
Hmm.
kind of dentistry or the dentist that I want to be. And so, like you said, like, okay, ignore trying to keep up with everyone else and ignore trying to be profitable and just focus on, okay, how do I do good quality work? And then, so again, like you said, I ended up booking longer again and just being like, I like my days when I have less patients and just longer appointments. And it's like, I get whatever I can get done in this appointment, but I'm doing it the way that I want to do it.
100%. Because it allows you to go into
Mm.
that sort of flow state.
Yeah.
If you've got 10-minute back-to-back appointments, like you
I
cannot,
hate it.
yeah, you can't
Yeah.
really focus on anything. So
Mhm.
some ways to increase your efficiency without making mistakes or too many mistakes. The
Mm.
number one thing is learning how to do quadrant dentistry or learning to do quadrant dentistry. If you're
Mhm.
doing one filling at a time, like you were saying earlier, for an hour and a half, etc.,
Mhm.
at the start that might be
Mhm.
fine, but later
Mhm.
on, it's a bit too much time for a single filling. Let's just say it's an MO.
Mm.
So then what you can do
Mm.
is you can group it with, the DO next door. Or if you're going to
Mhm.
do an MO and there's a crown prep to be done, you might as well do the crown
Mm.
prep and the MO at the same time. So the lab can give you a
Yeah.
perfect contact. That's sort of
Mhm.
another example of quadrant dentistry. You'll find that not
Mhm.
only the efficiency is better, but also the patients don't have to come back, 4 times to fill each tooth, because patients
Yeah.
have lives. Like you have to remember, they have kids, they have work. Sometimes they have to travel a little bit to get to you. So you want to, word it in a way where it's like, look, we're going to save you a bit of time here. If we can do all this work together, so you won't have to see me too often. Because, as good of a dentist as you are, patients don't like being at the dentist.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I noticed they get burnt out as well. Like I've
Yeah.
had times where you end up like treatment planning them. You're like, oh my goodness, this is like 10 appointments to get everything done.
Yeah.
And they're motivated for the first couple and then they just get burnt out and life gets in the way and they
Hmm.
end up not coming to the other 7 appointments. So
Yeah. So yeah, you'll
mm.
finish like a couple of crowns and they'll be like, oh, we'll just leave the rest for later.
Mm.
The next point is doing 1 versus 2 crowns. So if you've got like a 1/6 and 1/5 that need some sort of, indirect work done, you
Mhm.
should offer to do both at the same time to the patient. Don't assume that they're not going to say yes to two, and so you get to offer
Mm.
one. If you offer both, you can tell them the advantages of doing both. So we can get more idealized shapes of the teeth. The
Mhm.
colors can be perfectly matched. It gets to save you another 2 appointments. Everything gets done. And the difference in time from prepping 1 crown to 2 crowns, at least for me, is about 3 minutes. Like it doesn't take me
Mm.
much longer to do two versus one. And you need to convey that
Mhm.
to the patient because they think it's another additional, like,
Double.
yeah, they think it's
Yeah.
double, but really
Mhm.
it's not with quadrant dentistry. Another one that I think you talked about last time was to obturate and then prep that
Mhm.
tooth, and temporize it for
Mhm.
then. That's a really good sort of efficiency hack because you've already got the tooth relatively, you've got it isolated, the patient's already numb, you can just get straight into it and just prep the tooth.
Mhm.
Doing fillings and then doing a splint scan is another one. That one's pretty good.
Mhm.
Instead of finishing the fillings, they go away, they come back, you do a splint scan, they go away, they come back, you do an insert. Why not just
Mhm.
do the splint scan right after your fillings? Again,
Mhm.
reducing the number
Mhm.
of appointments, keeping everything efficient, and
Mhm.
always give the patient the options of doing multiple things in one go instead of just assuming
Mhm.
that, oh, they'll say no or it'll be too expensive. What do you think,
Mhm.
Erica?
Yeah, this was something that when I first started really just like blew my mind. I had this one of my initial orientation sessions when I was just joining the practice, and it was me, my boss, and our senior dentist, my senior mentor, and they were just we did this exercise. And it was exactly this. It was just like, this is the patient that's walked in your doors. Erica, go treatment plan them and tell us how many appointments you need. And I was like, I looked at it all, and they needed like fillings in every quadrant. They needed a root canal and a crown and a splint and everything. And I was just like, 7? And then they're like, "My goodness, Erica,
Mm.
like, your poor patient." And then we like my senior dentist had treatment planned it in like 4, and then my boss had it in like 3, right? But we thought he was cheating when he was doing it. But it was just like, yeah, realizing how do you I think it works, right? It works to everyone's advantage of, when we talked before about the benefits of just having a longer appointment, but doing more work, booking plenty of time, less stress, it's easier for the patient, and it just works. I guess it's like to everyone's advantage, right? So I think it just really changed my way of looking at a treatment plan.
100%.
Mm.
And I think, yeah, this is a very, very important point for new grads, especially if you're
Mhm.
starting to feel the pressure of like, oh, why am I taking an hour and a half to do one
Yeah.
filling? you could be
Mm-hmm.
just doing a quadrant of fillings and you get to see less patients in a
Mm-hmm.
day and you get to go home and
Mm-hmm.
not be burnt out.
Yeah, you said something before, and as before when we just jumped on call, we said we both had like hectic days. Clearly, I've not mastered my appointment scheduling because my day was hectic because I was back to back all day and I did
Mm,
not have any time to chill out.
yeah.
Whereas you said you had a hectic day as well, but you mentioned something where you said you like to leave your big procedures to the end of the
Yeah.
day. And I thought that was really interesting. And I
hmm
really wanted to hear you kind of explain your rationale for that.
Yeah. So having
Mm.
big procedures at the end of the day means I get to go home afterwards. So
Yeah.
like today was like a 66 prep and
Mm.
lower anterior preps as well. And by the end of it, like because your loop slide is so bright, like I'm seeing double, I'm a bit out of it because I've been focusing for so long. I don't really want to go and see a clean afterwards or do a filling. You know what I mean? I just want to go home right after. So that's why I've sort of learned to schedule these big appointments at the end of the day and just book out the whole afternoon. So even if I
Mhm.
finish early, I'm going home. Okay.
Yeah.
If I finish late, obviously the nurses don't like me, but they're aware that I could run late. So there's always a nurse on that is happy to stay back. But a lot of the
Mhm.
times, you finish on time and then you leave, you can do your notes at home if you've got cloud software, but you can leave right after and you don't have to worry about running late for the next patient or,
Mm.
especially if you've got like another procedure right afterwards. You have to remember your DAs still have to clean the room, like they still have to pack everything up, set everything up. You just don't want to create that stress. So for me, if it's a big procedure or a complex procedure, it's almost always at the end of the day. I know some people like to do it at the start of the day when they're fresh, but
Yeah.
the issue with that is if you run late with that complex procedure, that has a knock-on effect for the rest of your day. So
Yeah.
unless you're sure that you can be done on time, or you just book
Mhm.
a lot longer, then I would usually advise to have it at the end of the day. And in the morning, just make sure that they don't book anything too crazy. So you're not
So you're
tired.
not using up.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, like, do a couple of cleans, a filling here or there, because even if you're, like, considering production or anything, you've already hit your production goal by doing that complex work at the end of the day, so that the production pressure is off you. That's why I'm like, "I'm good to go home after this." Like,
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
doesn't bother me at all. So that's my
Mm.
rationale for it. It's not really too complex, but for me.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense though, because I think it's something we don't really consider. And I know it's just perhaps more of like a practice management kind of
Mm,
point, but how you schedule your books and, when you first start, it's just like, okay, wherever there's availability, just shove the patient in there. But over time, you start realizing, hang on, I don't really like doing this kind of procedure at this point in the day, or this doesn't really work as well. And you start realizing where are like the optimal times to do
yeah,
certain procedures, or when is the best time to see a new patient, or
yeah,
like a patient that doesn't like it when you run late, then you're like, okay, first thing in the morning or first thing right after lunch where
exactly,
you
yeah.
can't be late for them, like those kind of things you start learning.
Definitely
Right?
ideal times for new patients are those because you don't wanna be
Yeah.
late to the
Mm-hmm.
first time. For me, for
Mm-hmm.
example, for implants, I don't like to do them in the morning because I have coffee,
Yeah.
so I'm a bit shaky.
Yeah.
Yeah. I make a zigzag
Yeah.
incision. So yeah, I don't
Yeah.
do those first thing in the morning. I don't like to do back to back to back fillings. So if it's 2 fillings after each other, that's fine. If it's 3, then I'm over it by the end of it. Because
Mm-hmm.
honestly, fillings do take a lot of concentration to do well. So those are the type of procedures, or I don't know if I personally, like I said, don't like endo. So if I had 2 endos in a row, I'd be like, I'm calling in sick.
But I feel like a lot of the 6-month recalls, it's just like you guys know each other, but they're just like we're in and out, right? And so it's just small talk. And then when it's like one after the other, one after the other, and after the other,
Yeah.
it gets. I don't know, maybe it's the introvert of me, but like I find them really
No, no.
draining. So it's like
It's
them scattered throughout the day
yeah,
are like, oh, this is like it's an easy hygiene.
yeah.
Like it ends up being like a breath of relief. But
Mhm.
when it's just like a whole slog of them, it feels really
Yeah.
draining getting through them
I have
all.
a special respect for hygienist OHTs because they can do that the whole day. I'm just like, it's honestly draining even if you're an extrovert. It's just because it's the constant new person, new person, new person. It's definitely not for me, but I don't know how some people do
Yeah.
it, but they do. All right.
Last one, Anas, number
Yes,
10.
making it through. The last one is team
Mm-hmm.
dynamics. And I know this is something you're passionate about. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
picture
Mm-hmm.
of a tripod on the screen for the viewers, or for the listeners, sorry. And we've got
Mm-hmm.
you, your nurse, and reception. And that's sort of
Mm.
the trifecta or the combination. If one of these legs of the tripod is missing, the whole thing will
Mhm.
collapse. So an example of that is if you and your nurse are really good in the room and everything goes perfect, and you tell the patient, yep, we're going to book you for this and that, and they go out to reception and reception just says, how about you go home and have a think about it? That sort of somebody's dropped the ball. If, for example, you're not great, but your nurse and reception are really good, the
Yeah.
patient is rebooking. It pretty much, you all need to be on the same page, and you all need to like each other relatively for it to work, because patients can sense if there's any tension in the team. So
Yeah.
you got to be nice to your nurses. And I wasn't always nice, but now I am.
What changed
In
in
case
us?
they're
What do you
listening.
mean by that?
In case they're listening. No, I used to just be like relatively like blunt and like, oh, this is my job, this is your job, blah blah blah. And I find that being a hole to your nurse like is counterproductive. Like, they're
Mm.
there to make your life easy. You should be trying to make their
Yeah.
life easy. We'll talk about like more senior DAs because it's a little bit different than the younger ones. But you're all on the same team, and if you make it like a you versus me type thing, patients can sense it. The nurse doesn't want to be there. And yeah, unfortunately, nurses cop it a lot from dentists. And I've heard obviously horror stories. I'm very friendly with my nurses now, even the
Mm.
ones that leave, just stay in touch and we're friends, etc. So you really want to sort of form a bond with your nurses because they're your second wife a lot of the time, or second
Yeah, it's
husband.
like
Yeah.
100%,
Mm.
right? It's like you spend more time with them than you do with anyone else. And I think sometimes we forget it when you're locked in this tiny 3 by 3 room with the same person throughout the whole day and you're both like on seeing such a stressful cases like back to back. It can be a lot. I remember just before Christmas, there was like, it was literally the week leading up to Christmas. And we always know that that's the most stressful week because labs are closing. Everyone wants to use their
Yep.
health fund before the end of the year, but then, nothing's working and then you're
Mhm.
fully booked. And so it's such a stressful time. And I remember just like my DA and I, it was like 10 a.m. We'd only seen like 2 patients at that point, but both of us were like so frazzled. Like I was running in and out, she was running in and out. We're
Mhm.
both just like on it. And I think at one point I just stopped and just looked at her. And we both just like, we just looked at each other. And I was just like, what's got your knickers in a knot, hey? And then she's just like, what's up with you, huh? And
Yeah.
then we both just like, kind of just like, had this,
Mm.
like, had it out. We talked it out. We're like, you know what? Like, we're on the same
Yeah.
page, right? Like, I'm stressed, you're stressed, but we're not angry at each other. Like, at the end of the day, we're both trying to get through the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's us against the world, right? And then
Mm.
I don't know, it's really nice when you know that regardless of how stressful it is, how difficult the patient is, you are on the same team. And it just means, I know everything else just runs so much smoother. Whereas when you're stressed and you've got a difficult patient or a difficult case, but then you're worried about, are you stepping on your DA's toes, or are they upset at you,
Yeah.
or they're getting annoyed with you and they're huffing and puffing and they
Mm.
want to go to lunch, then it just doesn't make for a good environment,
Yeah.
right? So I'm very big on that. And there's so many ways to, I guess, like optimize it and like how to get your nurse on board so that they also feel like at the same time, like as much as we are growing, they are also growing as well, right? And the more you involve them and like they're part of the journey, then I guess it just makes work more fun for everyone involved.
Mhm. Yeah, look,
Yeah.
100%, and being approachable to your nurse is also helpful.
Mhm.
So if
Mm.
there's any issues, they need to be able to tell you early before it builds up and becomes a massive problem.
Yeah.
If you're not very approachable, like super defensive, like they're not going to tell you, and it's just going to build up, and then suddenly they're going to start working with someone else, and you're going to get a new nurse, and then you're going to get another new nurse. So a lot of the time it's, being approachable, even telling them up front, look, today, I didn't get much sleep, so I might be a bit short. So they're up front.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
even sometimes I'll tell nurses, like, tell me if I'm being like too blunt or something, like, because I'm just
Mm.
naturally blunt. So I'll be like, tell me if
Mhm.
I'm offending you, etc. And they're very honest with me. They're like, look, the way you said this made me feel a certain type of way. And I'm like, look, I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. Buy them some snacks, water under the bridge. So a lot of the time it's just, building that rapport with even your staff, I reckon.
But we're talking about mentorship before, right? And
Mm,
like humility. And I think that your DAs are such a, like, they themselves are huge mentors, particularly as a new grad.
yeah.
And you mentioned before about senior DAs. And we know it's
Mm,
a bit of like a fine line because, you have some DAs that can be a little bit kind of maybe undermine you. But I know myself, like when I first started, I had a couple of DAs that I feel like when I wasn't confident and I did feel a little bit stepped over, but then there was maybe 4 or 5 months in my first year where I was with a senior DA who was just phenomenal at giving feedback in a really like constructive way
Mm.
that never undermined me in front of the patients.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I grew so much in those months. And she was like my mentor, essentially, just chairside mentor. And then even now going into my third year, I've had DAs that have been with me for like a year and a half or so. And then, sometimes we just have reflections and chats about like, do you remember when you both first started? And then you kind of learn, and it's great to hear the feedback from them and like things that they think you do well or things that you could improve on as well. So I think, speaking of mentorship,
Mm-hmm.
there it exists even in your room. This is someone who's watching you every single day, doing every little thing, every word you say. Like
Yeah.
there's someone right there that can give you so much advice, right? And
100%,
feedback.
especially the
Mm.
experienced DAs. I think my first mentor is pretty much, I had a really senior, she was like 60 or something. I don't even know why she was still working, but she
Yeah.
was 100% my first mentor because she'd worked with so many
Mm.
dentists. So she had like this
Mhm.
wealth of knowledge, like, oh, I worked with a dentist that did it this way and this guy did it this way. So I got to try different things. And
Mhm.
at the start, like they can sort of step over the boundaries a little bit because they see you struggling and fumbling and they're just like, just do it like this. But by setting the boundary early, you can be like, look, I'm inexperienced, obviously, but I want to learn. I just don't want to learn in
Mhm.
front of patients. So if
Mhm.
you have if you want me to
A
do something a
suggestion.
certain way, yeah, say it to me as a suggestion to the patient. Like if you're struggling with an exo, don't just say,
Do you want me to go grab this?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Did you need
Mm.
this? Did you need the root pick, for example? Instead of being like, you should
Mhm.
use a root pick in front of the patient.
Yeah. 100%.
There's
Yeah.
nothing that would crush the patient's confidence in you faster than that. Yeah, so that would be my main thing is just telling them like that and then not getting all defensive and like, don't tell me how to do it. So that's kind of my thing. And I think you covered the rest with team dynamics really well. I've
Yeah.
just got,
The one thing I wanted
go.
to
Yeah,
sorry,
go
Anas.
for it.
The one thing I wanted to add to that was I remember attending Mark Hassad's his relaxed dentist communication course. And one thing that he brought up about like team dynamics that I hadn't thought of previously, but I thought was such a great, I guess, advice was he said, like, maybe as dentists and our personalities, some of us are more shy or more humble, and we don't really want to brag but he's just like, show your work to
Hmm.
your nurses or show them, like, like, if you do a cool case, like, get them in on it or showcase it. And he says, because, like, at the end of the day, they're your biggest advocates, your nurses. And much like what you said at the beginning when we talked about your nurse being the one that brings your patient in and the one that your patients are comfortable like opening up to and chatting, like if they like you and they're on your same team and they stand by the quality of your work or your chairside manner and all of that, like if they genuinely truly believe in you, that comes across. And same thing with reception. At the end of the day, all power lies within reception. Patient calls in with the toothache or patient calls in because they want a consult. Who are they going to book them into? Like all the dentists are free. They're going to pick the one that they like the best or the one that they trust or the one that, they think the patient would be best served with. And so if you have a good relationship with them is one thing, but if they also back your work, then it works to your advantage at the end of the day, right?
Hmm. Yeah, the fastest way to be humbled is to ask
Mm.
or to see who the nurses get their work done by and the receptionists. That's a
Mhm.
very quick way to be humbled if none of them want you to do their work. If you're ready for it, then ask. Now, I've got just two quick bonus tips, and then I think
Mhm.
we'll try to wrap it up. But
Yeah.
the first one is don't be afraid to work less days. I think I've been trying to
Mhm.
work on you with this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Still not there.
yeah, look, the
Mhm.
main things that make you happy a lot of the time is uh, what I found out and what the studies also show is not, earning more, buying things. It's usually the three F's and working to serve people. So the three F's are family, friends, faith, whatever you want to believe in, and work to serve
Mhm.
others. Working purely for money, you will burn out very, very quickly because you get to a certain amount of money where more money does not change your life by that much. And, or else, no billionaire would be super depressed, but there's a lot of them that are.
Mm.
So
Mm.
you really want to focus on those four aspects of your life. And the only way you can do that,
Mm.
if you're working like 5, 6 days
Mm.
and you're doing the back to back type of work that you were talking about with the recalls, you get home and
Mm.
you're exhausted. You're not going to really
Mm.
give much effort to family, friends, etc. Your friends want to hang out. You just got home at like 7 p.m. Yeah, I'm
Mm.
like, oh, I got to go to bed. I got work the next day. Same with trying to work to serve others. It's very hard to work to serve others if you're doing 20 cleans a day.
Mm.
you, at that point, you're just trying to get through the day instead of, yeah. So
Mm.
those are the kind of the common themes I see with burnt out dentists is they're not doing work they enjoy and they're not
Mm-hmm.
doing it for the right reason. Has
Mm-hmm.
that been your experience, Erica, with kind of talking
Yeah,
to
as you were
burnt out
saying.
dentists? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was literally just thinking because one of my issues, like just the other day, was just I think we're in a super busy time of the year right now, fully booked down. So classic like Saturday issue where everyone wants to be seen, and so front desk is doing their best, but then what that means is like 10-minute appointments being shoved into my books, right? And all
Mm,
my other appointments are getting shortened. And I was so just like on edge the whole day. But what you said just then about like, oh, a big thing for me is the ability to serve
hmm
others, right? And like to give them my full attention and to feel like I'm giving them the best, like all my efforts, right?
hmm
And doing them justice when, like you said, it's just 10-minute appointments or 20-minute appointments. And, a DA is frantic trying to like, wipe down and then you're having this conversation, but then you're being cut short. It's like, this doesn't feel fulfilling. This doesn't feel enjoyable. And I can see that being just like the recipe for
Yeah.
disaster. I realized at one point where it's like, oh, do I need to necessarily work more days? And some people talk about like, do you need to work more days to be on whatever it is, like to earn more, to be more productive. And I realized maybe not. Like it's more so focusing on the days that you do have and just figuring out how do I be more efficient? How do I be more
Yeah.
productive? How do I better serve my patients in the days that are already work? It's not necessarily always more. And I think
hmm
this is what you advocate for. This is what you teach, right,
100%.
Anas?
I'm on three
Yeah.
days a week. Yeah.
Yeah. The goal is to get to your point. I'm still on
Yes,
5 right
we'll
now.
get you there. Don't worry. Yeah. But honestly,
Yeah.
productivity wise,
Mm.
I used to do 6 days when I first graduated,
Mm-hmm.
dropped to 5. I noticed my production went up and I was less stressed. Then I was like, dropped to 4, production went up. I'm less stressed. Dropped to 3. I maintained my production and I've got so much free time. So I'm like
Mm-hmm.
doing a bunch of random stuff in the garden. I'm like, oh, I
Yeah.
should learn tennis. This is going to be the tennis day because I'm watching the Australian Open.
Yeah.
I was like, this doesn't look too
Yeah.
hard. And then I
Yeah.
blew my back out on the first swing. But
Oh, no.
like, yeah, you start
It's
to enjoy
yeah.
life. Like, if you're not busy
Mhm.
working, you start to enjoy life. You can make your work days a bit less draining so that when you get home, you can do other activities. But with me, I would just rather do less days, make those days relatively productive and intense, and then just take 4 days off.
Mhm.
So I'm always similar to holiday mode, pretty much. I'm always on holiday mode.
Mm.
And that's what I'm really passionate about teaching other dentists how to do. But there's a
Mhm.
lot of fear with dropping a day. It's like, oh, is my income going to
Mm.
go down? Patients aren't going to want to
Yeah.
see me. In fact, by making
Mm.
yourself more exclusive, patients want to see you more
Mm.
because they're like, oh, they only
Mm.
work these days. I need to come
Mm.
on these days then. That was bonus number 1. And then we'll just go to bonus number 2 because I think we've covered that one pretty well. This one is also very common for when you're newer, and I was, a victim of this early on, is don't feel pressured to treat patients on the day and don't feel
Mm.
pressured to treat everyone, especially if you're not getting good vibes, and
Mhm.
don't feel pressured to treat if unsure. So if somebody comes in for an emergency appointment and they've got vague symptoms, don't just
Mhm.
extirpate the tooth because you think it's that one. Do something a
Mhm.
little bit less invasive, get them to come
Mhm.
back, and then the tooth will usually show itself if it is what you think it
Yeah.
is. Another one is if you've got a short 10-minute appointment because you've squeezed an emergency in, don't feel pressured to do the treatment on the day and then you run late the rest of the day. That obviously reception has a role to play where they tell the patient, look, we've squeezed you in, you're pretty much
Mhm.
doing them a favor. But
Mhm.
again, don't feel pressured to treat on the day. And then the last one is don't feel pressured to treat everyone. So
Mm.
not everyone's going to like you. It's okay. It's normal not to treat everyone. If you feel uncomfortable, if you're not getting good vibes, if something feels off, then refer it to somebody more experienced or a specialist. Obviously, do what you can. But if yeah, you really don't want to be doing a difficult procedure on a difficult patient. Especially as a new grad.
We kind of came full circle with that because I think we touched on that at the very beginning and we talked about, being out rural and, having patients that are willing for you to see them because they don't want to go see the specialist. And you said also don't feel pressure to treat it if you feel like it's beyond your scope. Like
Yeah.
everything we said has kind of tied back together, hey,
Mhm.
Annas. But I do feel like this is a really important point because as a new grad, you feel like you have to be the superhero and you have to be able to manage every single case that walks through your door. But in my experience now being in my third year and then even seeing more senior dentists, I realized that with more experience, you end up saying no to more people
Mhm. Yeah.
and kind of knowing where your limitations
I
are.
love
And
referring. Oh, it's the
yeah.
best. It's the best. Yeah.
And it kind of comes back to that again, that same point about authenticity, right?
Mhm.
When you said if you're unsure, I think just being upfront with your patients, just
Mm.
like, hey, it's not clear. Or I think across all these things, it's like being authentic about like not having enough time to treat them or being, yeah, honest about it, being honest about not knowing which tooth it is.
Mhm.
I think patients appreciate the fact that you're just honest about the limitations and the reality of it as opposed to just trying to make things work or trying to force it or
Yeah.
guessing, right?
So patients will
Mhm.
never not appreciate like thoughtful,
Mm.
unrushed care. So if you tell them this is
Mm.
why we're waiting, we don't want to do a root
Mhm.
canal on a tooth that doesn't need it. I don't want to take out a
Mhm.
tooth and you're still in pain. Let's do this least invasive option first. And then if something changes, definitely let us know or we'll get you back in for a review and then we'll treat then. Patients are appreciative because they're like, oh, this guy is actually like trying to figure out what the problem is instead
Mm.
of, oh, we'll take this tooth out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And as I feel like this was such a comprehensive like 10 points. This was round 2 of us doing it all again. We were like, I think we ended up doubling the amount of time we went through
Oh, yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
But thank you so much for all your generosity and taking all the time to go through all of this with your 10 pills of wisdom, with your 2 bonuses as well. I feel like I gained a lot out of it. I've been scribbling on my piece of paper
mm,
throughout the entire conversation. I was like, oh, this is a really great point. And I'm really glad that we dove into like these certain areas. And I think this will be really great for all our new grads that are in their first months, inevitably thinking about all of these things or encountering all these scenarios. And so I hope it gives them a bit of confidence and know that you're not alone. And, you know, we've been there, been through it, done that. You will get through,
yeah.
right?
Thanks for having me again. I'm sorry if I
Mhm.
was a bit slower this time. My brain is a bit fried after that case, but
No, that's
I
okay.
think
Yeah.
you also did well. I know you had a busy day as well. Yeah. And then if people really like it, we can definitely do like a part 2 for maybe,
Mhm.
2 to 5 years out or something like that. And then we can go from there.
Yeah. That's when we get the really good stuff.
Mm,
That's your
yes.
passion and joy and what you teach
Yeah.
day in, day out. Hey, and
Yeah.
as for this is a little teaser for all our audience. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so
No
much.
worries. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Graduate Dentist Podcast. I really hope you've taken something valuable away from this episode and that you feel heard, you feel seen, inspired, and optimistic about our journey as graduate dentists. As I always say, we're in it together, so let's spread the word, let's share the love, send this to your friends, your colleagues, and those who are on a similar path who you feel may benefit from being part of the community. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so send me a message, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time for another episode.